Path to Mediterranean Hegemony. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 Immigration. After all the ceremonies were completed, Ferdinand also rushed to the military hospital in Sofia to visit the wounded and condolences to the families of several martyrs. It has been busy for more than half a month before it came to an end. Of course, reporters are indispensable to follow, collect news materials, and photographers to accompany them to shoot and save them as precious film and television materials. The people are even more lively. Although the Bulgarian war has passed, the propaganda has continued, and the atmosphere of joy has not faded. Anyway, the media has come up with too much evidence to show that this war in Bulgaria is completely just. It is to fight for the rise of the nation, to liberate the compatriots squeezed by Serbia, to take back the homeland and drive away the Serbian invaders. The newly added part of the territory has been the inseparable territory of the Bulgarian Holy Spirit since ancient times. If you don't believe me, you can check the historical data. A large number of Slavs came here in the 6th century AD and merged with a small number of Turkic-speaking Bulgars, led by Isparuk Khan, who migrated from the northern coast of the Black Sea and the North Caucasus to Mesa, resulting in the Bulgarians. In the area south of the No River and north of the Balkan Mountains, the First Bulgarian Empire was established. Look carefully, including the entire Balkans. There are historical data that indicate that this is the traditional living area of the Bulgarians. And if that's not enough, there's the Second Bulgarian Empire. You can always find what you want. All the people living above are Bulgarians, and they can all testify that the Bulgarian military liberated them from the clutches of Serbia. They dare to swear by their faith in God. It is absolutely from the heart, and they will not participate in falsehoods at all. The editors can guarantee that there is absolutely no water injection this time, and these people are all for Bulgaria wholeheartedly. Anyone who doesn't support it goes to the other side. If you have any doubts, you can go to the field for investigation. Any organization or individual in the world is welcome to go to the scene to collect evidence. Regarding the propaganda of the Bulgarian domestic media, except for the Bulgarians who believe it, everyone else has a tacit understanding that they have not seen anything. So shameless. Are the Serbs still protesting? The 300,000 people of Bedu are represented like this, and it is the idiot who left voluntarily. But this is not important. Anyway, the people living on the land are Bulgarians. Each of them has proof that they are Bulgarian, for generations. Whoever dares to say no, just be in a hurry. Even if the agricultural tax in Bulgaria is half that of Serbia, it must be Bulgarian! The Bulgarian government led by Ferdinand is very open-minded. As long as there is evidence that he is Bulgarian, willing to accept the leadership of the Bulgarian government, learn Bulgarian cultural knowledge, and love Bulgaria, he can automatically obtain Bulgarian nationality. Therefore, the 20,000 newly added compatriots are all Bulgarian, a proper nationality, and there is naturally no unnecessary oppression and slavery. Ferdinand, who was free, began to care about immigration again, and convened cabinet ministers to hold a special immigration seminar. Prime Minister, what is your government's plan for taking back your homeland? Ferdinand. Prime Minister Constantine was named and excitedly replied, Your Excellency, the cabinet plans to divide into 3 regions for governance. But because the population is too small, the most important task of the cabinet at the moment is immigration. Ferdinand nodded with satisfaction and continued to ask, How is the immigration going? Constantine paused, sighed, and said embarrassingly, The immigration work is going well, but the population of Bulgaria is limited. Even if the people are eager to apply, many who do not meet the conditions have been rejected, including the military now. The total number of immigrants is only more than 50,000 people. Basically it has reached the limit. Ferdinand knew that a war had just been won, and now was the time for Bulgarian nationalism to explode, and to support the nation's construction. There are a lot of people who don't care about personal interests. However, it still does not change the nature of Bulgaria's sparse population. 4 million people are distributed on more than 100,000 square kilometers of land, which is already very small. It is indeed too difficult to develop new land. It is impossible for the government to abandon the original land in order to develop new land. There is simply no more than population in the society, and the slow progress of immigration is inevitable. Ferdinand thought for a while and continued, let's focus on adding new citizens. Then I'm trying to figure out a way to introduce a group of immigrants from Russia. It is still the old rule that farmers are the mainstay. After all, you are all aware of the situation in the Nis region. We can only focus on agriculture. The Serbs are too reckless. If this land is developed to accommodate a million agricultural population, it will not be a problem at all. At the end of the 19th century, the level of agricultural mechanization in the world was still very low, and the plain areas still had the value of promotion. In the mountainous, hilly and forest areas, it is better to use manpower honestly. Besides, Ferdinand was only trying to increase the population and strengthen the control of the land, and he did not intend to let everyone rely on that little land to make a fortune and become a well-off. As long as the output can be self-sufficient, agricultural taxes are good, but not it doesn't matter. Everyone in the cabinet looked at each other and smiled. It seems that every time Bulgaria lacks manpower, the Russian Empire can generously provide it. Of course, it would be better if it could not pay. Constantine smiled bitterly and said, Your Excellency the Grand Duke, if we immigrate from Russia just for the sole purpose of farming, then the cost will be too high. The plain area along the Morava River has economic value to develop, but the agricultural output ratio is too low in other mountainous, hilly and forest areas. And our current immigration costs are not at all low. On average, the cost of importing a young and strong workforce from Russia is as high as 300 levs, about 12 pounds, and the old and weak will also cost 125 levs, 5 pounds. At this price, it will take at least 20 years for us to recover the cost from them. If we engage in industrial production, we can recover the cost in 3 to 5 years. Economically speaking, the introduction of immigrants to develop mountainous and hilly areas outweighs the gains. Ferdinand nodded, understanding the Prime Minister's concerns. Most European countries now attach great importance to industry and despise agriculture, and they don't care much about human resources. This is also related to the fact that the great powers have vast colonies and have a large number of wealthy laborers. Naturally, they ignore the importance of population and the country. However, Ferdinand decided to change his mind to persuade them. After all, due to the limitations of the times, it is beyond their comprehension to talk about this now. Chapter 152 Negotiating Strategy. Ferdinand asked back, the account can't be calculated like this. In addition to economic value, we must also consider other factors. Did you notice that in the trade between Bulgaria and Russia, Bulgaria now belongs to the super team? If there is no previous immigration, which consumes most of the funds and covers up this problem, then the long-term trade surplus with Russia, even if we are allies with the Russian Empire, will still cause problems for a long time. Have you considered it? The faces of everyone changed greatly. This is indeed a big problem. If it cannot be handled properly, the future relations between Bulgaria and Russia will definitely be greatly affected. Bulgaria now imports industrial raw materials from the Russian Empire and sells industrial products to the Russian Empire. Because of the signing of a trade agreement, both parties enjoy low tariffs, and Bulgarian industrial products can compete with foreign powers by virtue of their price advantages. But how can it be so easy to take advantage of the hairy bears? No matter how good the relationship is, after a long time, conflicts will arise. Russia can't let Bulgaria take advantage of it all the time, right? No one has brought it up now. The big reason is that because of immigration, the Bulgarian government paid a lot of fees to the Russian Empire to offset the trade deficit. Russian aristocratic gentlemen profit from it. In addition, the quality of immigrants needed by Bulgaria is low. In the Russian Empire, it is similar to waste. Staying in the country will add chaos. If you leave, it will help alleviate domestic conflicts. In addition, the Russian Empire also hopes to influence Bulgaria's domestic and foreign affairs through immigration. and slowly assimilate Bulgaria. All these factors add up, and it is the Russian government who gave the green light and has never raised objections. Although I don't want to admit it, the problem is in front of us, and everyone can't ignore it. Now the Russian Empire is too important to the development of Bulgaria! Now everyone thought they understood why Ferdinand insisted on Bulgarianization. Wasn't it just to prevent Bulgaria from being annexed by the Russian Empire? Heavy pressure is blowing, and a sense of historical responsibility arises spontaneously. What can we do about it? Immigration is short-term. If there is no other way, then the trade conflict between Russia and Bulgaria will intensify sooner or later. Ferdinand suddenly realized that he seemed to have taken the problem too seriously, and it scared people. Just as he was about to say something, Chekhov suddenly said, "Your Excellency, in the short term, we can rely on immigration to balance the trade surplus, but after all, it is not a long-term solution. Is it feasible for us to give up certain industries as a balance point for the trade surplus?" Ferdinand nodded. If he didn't know the future direction, he would probably use this method to balance the trade surplus. For example, stop mining in the country and switch to importing from the Russian Empire, etc. Don't worry too much. With the current speed of development in Bulgaria, there is still a huge demand for manpower. At least 5 years, we must introduce immigrants on a large scale. 5 years is enough time for us to find new ways to solve the problem of trade balance. Everyone suddenly understood why the Grand Duke launched a war on the Serbs at this time. Why did he insist on expelling the Serbs? Once a trade conflict occurs between Bulgaria and Russia, it will inevitably cause domestic turmoil, and the economic crisis will break out, interrupting Bulgaria's development. However, the Bulgarian-Serbian War extended this crisis for 5 years, and the new land development has promoted the next development of the Bulgarian economy. Under a series of misunderstandings, Ferdinand's image in the hearts of everyone was infinitely raised a lot. "Your Excellency, what is our next strategy?" Constantine asked for advice. If it weren't for the fear of being treated as a monster, Ferdinand would have prepared and told everyone that he planned to make a fortune in the Greek-Turkish War. Now that the Prime Minister has asked, of course it can be said, "But anyway, you have to test your skills." It must be persuasive without revealing the ability of foresight. Ferdinand pondered for a moment, organized the language, stood up and said, "Look at the map on the wall. The countries that border us now have 3: Serbia, Romania, and Ottoman empires. Serbia doesn't need to think about it. It's just finished, and I've got everything I can get. Unless Austria-Hungary decides to annex Serbia, they will leave those troublesome places to us. Otherwise, don't think about it." Then look at Romania, sandwiched between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire. Even though their land is fertile, but it has not yet developed, you know that it is not a good choice to be neighbors with foreign powers. And the risk of expanding to Romania is too great. The two great empires of Austria-Hungary and Russia are eyeing him. The variables for us to join in are too large. Once Romania is divided, we will have to bear the pressure ourselves. Bulgaria is not ready yet. Prepare. Everyone knows what the Ottoman Turkish Empire behind it is. Even if the sultans make some changes, they still cannot change their declining nature. The ethnic contradictions in the country have tormented them to a half-death. They are now weaker every day, and on the surface they are still a big empire, but in fact they have rotted away from the roots. Looking at the map of the Balkans, the entire Balkan Peninsula, except Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro, is the territory of the Ottoman Empire. Macedonia, Thrace, Istanbul, Thessaloniki, Kosovo and other places that are close to us. If we can annex these areas, Bulgaria's territorial area can be directly tripled. Then the next problem is no longer a problem. The shortcomings of raw materials that restrict our industrial development can be supplemented. Ferdinand didn't keep it, and poured it out in one go. As for whether it will leak out, Ferdinand said that if the members of the cabinet are unreliable, then Bulgaria will not have to do anything. Just farm and wait to die. After listening to Ferdinand's strategic concept, everyone was dumbfounded. No wonder they're superficial. It's unbelievable. The weakness of the Ottoman Turkish Empire was revealed to the world only after the Armenians launched a rebellion in Constantinople. Then the Greeks will be the first to eat crabs after the crisis in Crete and declare war on the Turks with confidence. It's a pity that the Greeks saw the weakness of the Turks, but they didn't realize their weaker nature. Then a bad war broke out, and the Greeks were undoubtedly defeated, but the weak Ottoman Empire did not have the energy to seek the unlucky of the Greeks, and domestic contradictions forced it to shrink back. Chapter 153 Developing Strategy. No matter how you look at it, Ferdinand's strategy is full of temptation. Once Bulgaria completes its counterattack, Diocese instantly becomes a rich and handsome man. Of course, it is not so easy to complete this strategy. Although the Ottoman Turkish Empire has decayed, it is still so big, and the risk of failure is still not small. But in the face of interests, how many people can resist the temptation? If there is, it must be that the temptation is not big enough. Anyway, the current Bulgarian government is unable to resist the temptation to expand. Once the gains from the Serbian war alone are digested, it will be enough to save the Bulgarian government 10 years of struggle. Constantine said uncertainly, His Excellency the Grand Duke, can we do it? The Ottoman Turkish Empire is not weak. If they want to give up the Balkans, unless there is a full-scale war, can we win? Ferdinand smiled and said, if the Ottoman Turkish Empire can be fully mobilized, we are certainly not their opponents. But can they be fully mobilized? Don't forget, the Ottoman Turkish Empire is not much else. That is, there are many enemies. In the Caucasus and Crimea, they have to defend against the Russian Empire. In Central Asia and India, they have to worry about the British invasion. The Italians are eyeing the Libyan region. Austria-Hungary has already eyed the Bosnia and Herzegovina region and is ready to swallow it at any time. The Armenians in the country are fighting for independence, and other ethnic minorities are also restless. As long as we push it, there may be chaos at any time. So many unfavorable factors add up. Even if the Sudanese government attaches great importance to the Balkans, it is impossible to invest more than half of its forces and leave it idle in the Balkans without determining that we are going to do it. As long as these unfavorable factors are provoked, the rotten Ottoman Empire is not so invincible. After listening to Ferdinand's analysis, everyone nodded excitedly, and it seemed that the chances of success were still very high. At the end of the 19th century, the transportation in the Ottoman Turkish Empire was not very good. But the land area was so large that it was necessary to separate troops everywhere. If the war breaks out suddenly, I am afraid that the troops from all over the Ottoman Empire will not have time to assemble, and the war in the Balkans will be over. It's easy to lose territory, but it's hard to get it back, especially for a weakened empire. After all, weakening the Ottoman Empire is the consensus of all European powers. Even Germany, which supports the Sudanese government, cannot stand up for it on this issue. Unless you don't want to get mixed up in the world of Christ. After all, it's not the war yet, and the international conflicts have not intensified. The European people are politically correct to rescue the believers of God from the pagans. The ongoing crisis in the Near East is an example. The Armenians are fighting for independence. Under the pressure of public opinion, European powers are putting pressure on the Ottoman Empire. Chekhov asked excitedly, Grand Duke, when will we start? Is it ready now? Now the Armenians are fighting for independence, and the Ottoman Empire's suppression of Armenians has been condemned by the international community. If we intervene, the Armenians are independent and can easily get the support of the foreign powers. Everyone looked at Ferdinand with expectant eyes, startling him. Is this too urgent? I was just discussing the strategy, and now I plan to do it? No wonder the First Balkan War just ended and the Second Balkan War broke out again. Even if there is a conflict, you can use diplomatic means to delay the time. If the Second Balkan War dragged on for a few more months and Bulgaria completed its strategic material reserves, then history may have been rewritten. Ferdinand also knew that this is a common problem of small countries. They are impatient in strategy, easy to be aggressive, and lack long-term vision. No, we have just finished fighting Serbia, and the strategic materials have been consumed a lot. Also needs to be supplemented. Moreover, the results obtained this time still need to be digested before they can be converted into national power. Said Ferdinand with certainty. Ferdinand's words were like a basin of cold water falling from the sky, pulling Constantine and others back from their dreams. Now the Ottoman Empire is indeed very weak, but Bulgaria, why doesn't it need to recuperate? Launching a war at this time is completely thankless. Are you fighting a lose-lose war? After calming down, everyone began to make a series of plans around this strategy. First of all, reserve training must be further expanded. The Ottoman Empire is not Serbia, let alone the combat effectiveness of the army, but the number is absolutely indispensable. 200,000 Bulgarian troops can hang and beat Serbia, but if the opponent is the Ottomans, they will be buried by the sea tactics. The Serbs are the best negative example. After the outbreak of the war, they sent soldiers who had never been trained to the battlefield, and then contributed to the Bulgarian army's remarkable record. The cabinet has always decided that the training time of the reserve force must be extended every year, and the scope must be expanded. Simply in the slack season, the training is good for 2 months, which is 4 times as long as the original half-month. The scope is good, the whole people will participate, and all young people of school age must participate, including government officials. Ferdinand took a deep breath when he saw it. This is too cruel. Even the members of the cabinet are members of the reserve force and must make time to participate in training. Sure enough, it is a fighting nation, going crazy, not letting go of my own. Then, Ferdinand simply cut out the top government officials. What, are you kidding? If the battle reaches the point where cabinet ministers are required to carry their guns to the front line, it is estimated that Bulgaria is also finished. Second, of course, is the material reserve. In the later period of the Bulgarian War, the logistics of the Serbian army collapsed. Thanks to their defeat too fast, they did not have time to experience the misery of running out of ammunition and food. When it came to the people of Belgrade, they experienced the pain of a lack of supplies. Grain reserves are the easiest. The government still controls more than half of the country's land. As long as the grain produced is sold less every year, it will be saved. And there are new territories. As long as the immigration is in place and the land is developed after 1 or 2 years, the total grain output of Bulgaria will be further improved. You don't have to worry about this aspect. The most troublesome thing is weapons and ammunition. In a mere siege war, Bulgaria fired more than 90 million rounds of bullets and more than 200,000 rounds of artillery shells, completely suppressing the Serbs in terms of firepower, and only then could they easily win. Needless to say, of course, the production line will be expanded immediately. As for the excess budget, it doesn't matter if it is a few million levs. The Bulgarian government can still find a way to get it together. Chapter 154, Undercurrent. Facts have proved that Ferdinand's choice is not wrong. After determining Bulgaria's next strategy, the cabinet's potential was stimulated, and 12 points of combat effectiveness broke out into a new round of preparations. Even so, the second 5-year plan, which was interrupted by the war, was carried out in an orderly manner. Ferdinand, who was free, turned his attention to his old neighbor, the Ottoman Empire. With the end of the Bulgarian-Serbian War, the call for Bulgaria to get rid of the suzerainty of the Ottoman Empire is getting louder and louder, even though Bulgaria has long ceased to be the Sudanese government. The nationalistic Bulgarians are increasingly dissatisfied with their nominal suzerainty. Oh, never satisfied. To get rid of the suzerainty of the Ottoman Empire and establish a completely independent Bulgarian kingdom is the voice of the majority of the Bulgarian people. However, they were all suppressed by Ferdinand's strong prestige. Now is not the time to turn against the Ottoman Empire. Bulgaria is not ready for war, but it does not prevent Ferdinand from making small moves! 1895 was a turbulent year. The just concluded Bulgarian War, and the crisis in the Near East began to intensify. That is, after the Sino-Japanese War began, the overwhelmed Armenians also rose up. This time, unlike history, Ferdinand also intervened, and the Greeks, Arabs, and Kurds were all involved. Armenians lived in the mountainous and plateau areas of northeastern Asia Minor. In the 19th century, they were affected by Russia, Ottoman, and Persia. By 1894, there were more than 1 million Armenians living in the Ottoman Turkish Empire. Armenians believe in Christianity and are incompatible with Turks. Most of them live in the 6 provinces of Armenia, live together with the Kurds, and are mainly engaged in agriculture and animal husbandry. There are also some people living in cities, such as Constantinople has 150,000 Armenians. In the late 19th century, because the Armenians were a minority and their religion was incompatible with the Turks, they were exploited and oppressed by the Turkish government. After the intensification of ethnic conflicts, Armenians also launched activities against Sudan's rule, demanding national independence and autonomy. After the national independence of the Balkans, resistance activities became more frequent. The Armenian resistance, which also angered the Ottoman rulers, was brutally suppressed. After the outbreak of the economic crisis, the Ottoman Empire was also affected. In order to alleviate the crisis, attention was diverted. The Ottoman government has targeted the ethnic minorities in the country, trying to plunder the wealth of the ethnic minorities to survive the crisis. So they provoked the contradiction between the Kurds and the Armenians, and took the opportunity to massacre the Armenians. In August 1894, the Turkish army and Kurds massacred thousands of Armenians in Sassoon, followed by massacres in Yozgat, Urfa and other regions. After the news spread, it attracted the attention of the international community. Due to the intervention of the foreign powers, it gave the Armenians an illusion that the international community supported their independence. The rebel group thought the opportunity for independence was coming, and the uprising broke out. However, due to the different interests of the powers in the Ottoman Empire, it was difficult to reach an agreement with each other, and the crisis in the Near East broke out. In line with the principle of blocking the enemy, Ferdinand also played a disgraceful role in this incident. The ethnic conflicts in the Ottoman Empire have always been serious, and the core problem is religion. The largest ethnic group, the Turks who believe in religion, the second largest ethnic group, the Orthodox Greeks, the third largest ethnic group, the Arabs who believe in Islam, the fourth largest ethnic group, the Kurds who believe in Islam, the fifth largest ethnic group, the Bulgarians who believe in the Orthodox Church, On the surface, the Turks, Arabs, and Kurds all believe in Islam. In fact, they are different, and there are a lot of factions that are not messy. As we all know, heretics within are often more abhorrent than enemies outside. So this is the end. If you continue to write, you may be hit by a thunderbolt. Brain fill 100,000 words anyway. These contradictions were targeted by Ferdinand, and the intelligence officers secretly launched an operation codenamed Hunting Horses for this purpose. Since 1895, the Ottoman Turkish Empire has been unstable, and religious conflicts have occurred frequently. Today, the Kurds and Armenians are fighting. Tomorrow the Arabs are fighting with the Greeks. The day after tomorrow, the Turks and Bulgarians are fighting again. Suddenly turning around, Shiites and Sunnis clashed again, and Khaliji and Murgi were in park again. The Ottoman government was exhausted. At first, it was just a conflict between the bottom-level believers, but the intelligence officers hyped it up through the street tabloids, and then detonated public opinion. The Ottoman Empire can suppress the local newspapers, but it is powerless to the newspapers in the hands of the foreign powers. Otherwise there will be no crisis in the Near East. Public opinion has attracted the attention of the people, and everyone is waiting to see what the Ottoman Sultan government will do. Religious conflicts, mixed with ethnic conflicts, have never been right or wrong, no matter how you deal with them. Some people will be dissatisfied. Not to mention the decadent Sudanese government. The response was slow, and the handling was not timely. When the government intervened, there were several fights below, and the human brain was out of the dog's brain. There is no doubt that the Sudanese government's disposal favored its own people, which angered the Greeks and Bulgarians in the country. With the encouragement of the Bulgarian and Greek governments, they began to support the Armenian Revolution. Ferdinand is not the only one who has ambitions for the Ottoman Empire, but the Greeks are the most eager. Seeing the expansion of Bulgaria, George I of Greece was envious and jealous, and there was no way to border Greece and the Ottoman Empire. Of course, the Mediterranean also counts, but the Greeks still don't have the guts to compete with Britain and France for hegemony in the Mediterranean. Didn't they see that even Italy was a spectator? As early as a few years ago, Bulgaria's military expansion began, and George I used this as an excuse to follow up. Unfortunately, he only guessed half of it right. He didn't expect that the enemy chosen by Bulgaria was not the Ottoman Empire, but the Serbs. The idea that King George I planned to follow behind to pick up a bargain has failed. Now that the Ottoman Empire is surging, the Greeks can't stand it anymore and start to move. The foreign minister hurriedly entered the Sofia royal palace and reported to Ferdinand, His Excellency the Grand Duke, the special envoy of King George I of Greece, has arrived in Sofia in secret. Ferdinand nodded and said, "It seems that the Greeks can't stand it anymore. We still proceed as planned. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs can contact them first, explore the bottom line of the Greeks, and then decide whether it is necessary to cooperate with them." Reviewing the previous article, the author is ashamed. "I found a lot of problems, and the scumbags are really scumbags, and there are a lot of typos. Thank you for your support, tolerance, and pointers." Chapter 155, The Shocking Plan. The Greeks came to the door so quickly, which was somewhat unexpected to Ferdinand, but it was reasonable. Undercurrents are surging in the Ottomans, and the Greeks, as the second largest nation among them, bear the brunt and are taken care of. It was natural to get on the line with the Greek government, and George I immediately saw the opportunity. Thinking about the courage to single out the Ottomans and initiate the Greek-Turkish War, you know that the Greek government has never lacked courage. However, the positioning of their own strength is too ideal, and they suffered a fiasco when they started the war. Perhaps now the Greeks feel that they can fight the Ottoman Empire. In parallel time and space, Bulgaria is now busy with infighting, Serbia is not much better, and the country is a mess. Montenegro can be ignored. The Greeks had to fight alone. Now Serbia is even worse, but Bulgaria has grown stronger. The Greek government is not a fool. It is still known to pull allies to reduce the risk. At the time of negotiations with the Greeks, the international situation changed again. Since the British occupation of Egypt, relations with the Ottoman Empire began to estrange and deteriorate, and the Turks began to turn pro-German. The British now had control of the sea route to India, but they were still worried and tried to keep the traffic on the land clear. After the crisis in the Near East broke out, the United Kingdom put pressure on the Ottoman Empire through the Armenia issue, forcing the Ottoman Empire to compromise, recognize the status quo in Egypt, and consolidate Britain's position in the Near East. On the other hand, with the signing of the Congo Treaty, the contradiction between the British and the Germans intensified, and the British fell into a deadlock in European diplomacy. The British planned to make peace with Germany and change the passive diplomatic situation. At this time, France and Russia began to move closer. The British secretly promoted the alliance between France and Russia, and wanted to use the alliance between France and Russia to deter Germany and force the Germans to take the initiative to improve relations with the United Kingdom. For this reason, he also showed his favor to the French on the Moroccan issue, and made a move to win over Russia on the Nile issue. On November 9, 1894, British Prime Minister Ross Perry publicly spoke about the issue of reconciliation with Russia at the London Mayor's banquet. The Armenian issue that is breaking out has provided the British with an opportunity to get close to the foreign powers, that is, to establish a three-nation alliance of Britain, France and Russia on the Armenia issue. However, the attitude of other powers was far less positive than that of Britain. Germany, Italy and Austro-Hungary opposed action in the Near East. The Germans wanted to consolidate the Sultan's rule and strengthen Germany's influence in the Ottoman Empire. They did not want Turkey to change. The Russian Empire did not take the Armenian issue seriously. There are also a large number of Armenians living in Russia, and the persecution of ethnic minorities also happens from time to time. The current Far East strategy of the Russian Empire is at a critical moment. The Sino-Japanese War has drawn their attention, and they do not want to mix the water and affect their expansion in the East. France doesn't care, and runs with soy sauce all the way. On this issue, they chose to be consistent with the Russian Empire. The British know very well that on the Armenia issue, without the support of Russia and France, especially the Russian Empire, it is impossible to negotiate with the Sudanese government alone. Since the British got Egypt, the Near East issue has changed in the global strategy. The British government began to tend to carve up Turkey with the foreign powers. The core is to reach a carve-up agreement with the Russians. At the end of 1894, British Prime Minister Rossberry proposed that the Russian Empire occupy the Ottoman Armenian provinces in exchange for the Russians' recognition of Britain's status in Egypt. However, Ferdinand is very clear that the Russian government does not intend to use force against the Turks now. Otherwise he really doesn't mind being a thug. Or it is not impossible to join forces with Greece to take chestnuts from the fire. However, under the current international situation, if Bulgaria rashly joins forces with Greece to attack the Ottomans, it will follow the wishes of the British. The most important thing is that Bulgaria is not ready. At the end of the 19th century, it was an era of speaking by strength. The fist was not strong enough. Even if the Turks were defeated, Bulgaria would not get the greatest benefit. This was not in line with Ferdinand's strategic goals. However, under the butterfly effect of Ferdinand, the history of this world and parallel time and space has undergone slight changes. The alliance between Russia and Bulgaria and the Second Bulgarian War have affected the situation in the Near East. So Ferdinand is now closely related. The crisis in the Near East, look for opportunities in it. The ability to repair history is powerful. The British cabinet changed in 1895. The conservative aristocratic politician, the Marquis of Salisbury, became the British Prime Minister for the third time. The national policy of the United Kingdom has changed. When the Marquis of Salisbury took office, it was a crucial moment for Britain, France and Germany to compete in Africa. The British urgently need to solve the crisis in the Near East, and the core is to stabilize Russia. He advocated a one-time solution to the Eastern problems that have plagued Britain or Europe for a long time, and then proposed a plan to carve up the Ottoman Empire. The territory of the Turks will be limited to Anatolia. The Russian Empire will gain the Straits of the Black Sea, and Constantinople. Austria-Hungary receives compensation in the Western Balkans. Italy gets Tripoli or Morocco. The French get Syria or Morocco. The British gained Egypt and the Euphrates Valley. The Marquis of Salisbury's plan to divide the Ottoman Empire is against the traditional British policy of the Near East. If realized, it will definitely change the pattern of Europe and the world. Anyway, seeing this plan, Bulgaria is frightened. Greece is frightened, and Serbia is frightened. Once it is completed, the Balkan countries will see no hope. This plan is theoretically feasible. Except for the Germans, the major powers in Europe have all gained, and they are generally divided according to their respective strengths, which can be regarded as fair. Ferdinand had heard of this plan in his previous life, but he didn't take it seriously. Anyway, it failed in the end, but now it's gone. He knew that he had to take action immediately. Once the 5 countries of Britain, France, Russia, Italy and Austria-Hungary agreed, it would be a foregone conclusion. Even the Germans are powerless. After all, Germany at the end of the 19th century has not yet challenged the strength of the British. Ferdinand knew that since the plan proposed by the British was only superficial, there would definitely be compensation for the Germans afterwards. Historically, the Germans refused and blocked the partition. But what about this time and space? Ferdinand wasn't sure how big his butterfly effect was. What if the Germans agreed? After all, according to this plan, the conflict between Russia and Austria will be delayed and weakened, the pressure on Germany's eastern front will be greatly reduced, and the Anglo-German relationship will continue to move closer, even forming an alliance. From the perspective of future generations, promoting this plan is more in line with long-term interests. Fuji decided to save the manuscript, and if you save 10 chapters, it will be on the shelves. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156, Disaster Giant Dog. Ferdinand did not dare to gamble. He knew that Germany's opposition was only against France. In August 1895, William II and the Marquis of Salisbury met in Kuwait. Germany made it clear that they would not be interested in Turkey, as long as their plan was divided. The British would leave France behind and the two sides would further negotiate. It was an accident in history. The Marquis of Salisbury was delayed. He did not attend the second Kuwait meeting. He lost the opportunity to have in-depth communication with William II. And the British and German lost the best opportunity for cooperation! There was no in-depth communication between Britain and Germany, and the Germans made a strategic misjudgment, believing that in order to get rid of the diplomatic deadlock, the British compromised with France and Russia in the Near East, which would increase the chances of the Franco-Russian alliance attacking Germany on the European continent. The road to the British-German alliance was interrupted before it even started. None of this has happened yet, and Ferdinand doesn't know what the future will hold. Once Britain and Germany move closer, where will the world pattern go? After all, Germany at the end of the 19th century did not yet have the strength to challenge the British, and the empire on which the sun never sets was still developing rapidly. Look at a set of data to know from 1890 to 1900, the UK's GDP increased by 34% in this decade. And Germany's GDP growth rate was exactly 34%! Due to the gap in the base, the comprehensive strength of the two sides has not only not decreased, but has continued to increase. The British have obvious advantages. During this period, in the hearts of the British, the biggest enemy was Russia, followed by France, and even the United States was ahead of Germany. The British had not yet felt the threat of the Germans to its hegemony. Of course, Germany did not have the confidence to challenge the British. The pressure of the Franco-Russian alliance was enough to make the Germans concentrate on developing the army, build a big navy. Germans are not so proud yet. In order to stop this partition plan, the main targets are still Britain, France, Germany, and Russia, and we can only start from these countries. There are good ways. Ferdinand does not. But there are still stupid ways. The simplest and most practical way is to intensify the contradictions between countries. It is precisely the contradictions between these four countries that constitute the main contradiction in the current world. There are too many conflicts between the parties. Ferdinand knew that although the conflict between Britain and Russia was serious, since the strategic center of gravity of the Russian Empire moved eastward, the conflict between the two countries has eased a lot, and it is unlikely that it will break out. Not to mention the conflict between Germany and France. There is no need to provoke, both sides will stumble upon each other whenever there is a chance, and there is no room for Ferdinand to intervene. The rest is the contradiction between Britain and France and the conflict between Britain and Germany. It is too risky to sow discord. Ferdinand has no intention of doing it himself. Few people in the world can bear the anger of Britain, France and Germany. Then you can only use Yang conspiracy to create an event to attract the attention of the foreign powers. Dead Taoist friends do not die. Poor Taoists. Ferdinand first thought of the Anglo-Boer War, which occurred between 1899 and 1902. The British and the Boers fought for the dominion of South Africa. A war broke out. No way, who called South Africa too rich. In 1867, the discovery of diamonds in South Africa by descendants of the Dutch caused a sensation in the world, and treasure hunters flocked to it. In 1869, another large diamond, worth 625,000 francs, was discovered, which made Europeans more convinced that South Africa had rich treasures, which led to an unprecedented frenzy of finding diamonds. In 1884 and 1886, the world's most abundant gold mines were discovered in Transvaal, which set off a gold tide in Europe. The British colonial authorities in Cape, in order to monopolize the diamond-producing area, began to annex the land of South Africa. The annexation of the diamond-producing area Sliggaland in 1871, the annexation of the Boer Republic of Natalia in 1877, The annexation of all the cards in 1877, 1878 Flaria and Walvers Bay to the northwest. In order to prevent the Boers from developing to the eastern coastal areas, the United Kingdom prepared to seize Zululand in 1878 and wiped out the country of the Zulu people. In 1887, Britain annexed Zululand. After the defeat of the Zulu, a conflict between the British and the Boers was inevitable. In 1880, the British annexed the Transvaal region, but in 1881 Britain had to withdraw from the Transvaal region after its defeat in the Battle of Majuba. Shortly thereafter, a large number of gold deposits were discovered in the Transvaal area, followed by British gold prospectors from the Cape and Natal areas to the area. Thousands of British people began to settle in the area and petitions for suffrage and equal taxation, but no success. As a result, the situation in the region has become very tense. In the early 1990s, the British South African Company expanded its territory to the Congolese border, and the British African Lake District Company occupied Nyasaland, thus uniting the British colonies in South Africa. Rhodes, the Prime Minister of the British and South African colonies, clamored that the British would conquer the world and realize the so-called Cape Cairo Plan in Africa, which was an attempt to integrate the British North and South Africa into one. By the mid-1990s, the only obstacle to Rhodes' Cape Cairo imperialist project was the two Boer republics, Transvaal and Orange. Rhodes is organizing foreign immigrants from Johannesburg to subvert the rule of President Kruger of the Transvaal Republic from the inside, while preparing an armed attack from the outside. From December 1895 to January 1896, the Rhodes faction launched a sneak attack on the Transvaal Republic from the west, which was completely smashed by Kruger. In order to safeguard their interests, the Boers moved closer to Germany against Britain. The contradiction between Yingbo became increasingly acute, and a large-scale war was brewing. To put it simply, the situation in South Africa is on the verge of breaking out, and the British plan to carve up Turkey now is to stabilize the rear and concentrate on fighting for South Africa, the largest gold-producing area in the world. Knowing that South Africa is so rich, how could Ferdinand not get a piece of the pie? As early as 1885, when the United Mining Company was established, it entered the staking area in South Africa, and was not in a hurry to mine, and first got the land ownership. A few years ago, Ferdinand's intelligence organization also extended its tentacles into South Africa. After several years of operation, it now has a certain strength. There is no doubt about the contradiction between the British and the Boers. As long as the gold mines in South Africa are still there, it is impossible to ease them. In the face of huge interests, the British cannot let go anyway, and the Boers are also unwilling to give up the wealth they have acquired. The two sides only need a spark, and the war will break out, and all Ferdinand has to do now is to detonate this spark. On this issue, Rhodes, the Prime Minister of the British South African colony, is the best ally, or the British capitalists behind him are the best ally. On the issue of pushing Britain to go to war with the Boers, everyone has the same interests, and there are many common topics to speak of. Under the guidance of the United Mining Company, the capitalists who are eyeing South Africa's gold mines are connected with each other. Chapter 157, Launch. All is ready except for the opportunity. Now there is only an excuse, an opportunity for everyone to unite to attack. The power of capitalists is powerful. In the gold standard era of the 19th century, no consortium dared to ignore the role of gold. Behind these capitalists are British consortia large and small. If the United Mining Company hadn't had enough face for Edward, as a rising star, it didn't belong to any British consortium, and it wasn't even qualified to come in and get a share of the pie. This opportunity came quickly. On March 12, 1895, the Whittle Company, a subsidiary of British capitalist Cecil Rhodes, discovered a new deposit in the Transvaal region. The Boers confiscated it for illegal mining and expelled the Whittle representative. There was a conflict between the two sides. Unfortunately, a bullet hit one of the British, and he died of serious injuries afterwards. The integrity of the media has always been very low. Under the influence of capital, the news has been completely changed when it reaches London. The London Daily, with its front-page headlines, announced the atrocities of the Boers. Things have turned out to be. Representatives of Weddell's company purchased gold in the Transvaal region, Boer soldiers robbed property, and brutally killed British citizens. The headline of the Times is even more crowned, "This is a provocation to the British Empire." From the title, you can guess the content behind it. It has risen to the point of challenging the British world hegemony. If you don't give them a taste of their color, will it still be the British Empire? The Sun started its analysis directly from history, exposing the black history of the Boers expelling British citizens and looting property for no reason, and criticizing the government's inaction. To sum up, the government should go to war with the Boers as soon as possible. Whoever opposes it is a traitor! This is enough. The British have long wanted to attack the Boers, but they hesitated that the Germans supported the Boers behind their backs and never did it. Historically, in exchange for the neutrality of the Germans, the British agreed with Germany to divide up the Portuguese colonies in Africa. On August 30, 1898, Britain and Germany signed a partition treaty. The treaty stipulated that once Portugal gave up its African colonies, it would be divided between Britain and Germany. However, the British sided with the Germans. This treaty was only an empty check. The financial crisis in Portugal broke out the following year, and the British gave up the Germans and provided loans to Portugal. On October 14, 1899, the two countries signed the Anglo-Portuguese Secret Declaration. The United Kingdom provided security protection for all the territories of Portugal. When the Anglo-Bulgarian War broke out, Portugal must support the British actions. None of this is happening now, and the British would be in a lot more trouble if they went to war now. It was not in the interest of the British government that the British declared war on the Boers in the short term. But this had nothing to do with Ferdinand. The more trouble the English got into, the better it was for Ferdinand, who decided to add another fire. The Cape Cairo Plan has long been proposed. At the end of 1895, the British and South African colonial Prime Minister Rhodes once sent troops to attack the Transvaal Republic, but it failed. Now it only needs to advance, this time a little bit. For the British capitalists, this is not a problem. After all, at the end of the 19th century, the British Empire was in full swing, and the capitalists had enough confidence in their own strength that the small Boer Republic was already in their pockets. Under Ferdinand's instigation, an undercurrent began to spread in London. The media's continuous promotion of large-scale propaganda has put pressure on the British government. The capitalists have carried out public relations with members of Congress, and the main war faction has the upper hand. Since the supporters exceeded the same period in history, Rhodes, the Prime Minister of South Africa's colony, has a lot of confidence and courage. Issued an ultimatum directly to the Transvaal Republic. It was ordered to hand over the murderer within 24 hours, and the Boers were asked to open the right to vote, and the British in South Africa automatically got the right to vote. Obviously, there is nothing to talk about. The Boers are not so weak. Besides, if the murderer is handed over, it is not the same as admitting that the soldiers robbed and killed. How is this possible? For no reason. Why take the blame for this? Open suffrage is even more nonsense. A person of British nationality automatically gets the right to vote in the Transvaal Republic. Isn't this a world-class joke? Only an idiot can agree. They know very well that the British just want to make an excuse to do it, escape this and the next. Unless they give up all the gold mines, the two sides will not have to talk! Naturally, he refused the rude request of the British without hesitation, and sent an invitation to the international community, hoping that various countries would send an investigation team to conduct an on-the-spot investigation to uncover the truth of the matter. The Boers' public invitation was quickly supported by the international community. Germans, Dutch, French, Belgians, all expressed their support and willingness to participate in the investigation team. Will the British compromise? Obviously, in the face of interests, the resistance of the capitalists has been weakened infinitely, and a mere amount of international public opinion pressure will not scare them. On March 26, 1895, a group of thugs from the South African Colonial Army and gold miners joined together to form an army of 3,000 people. brazenly crossed the border and launched an attack on the Transvaal Republic. 5 times as much as in history this plan was opposed by Chamberlain, the then British Minister of Colonial Affairs. He believed that Britain was not ready for war, and the possibility of the success of the risky plan was too small, so he ordered the cancellation of the plan. However, limited by the end of the 19th century, the poor traffic environment, and the deliberate delay of some people, when Chamberlain's order was passed to the hands of the South African colonial Prime Minister Rhodes, everything was too late, and the coalition had already entered Delance Republic of Vaal. This rabble army has a very complex composition, consisting of mercenaries, hooligans, and gold diggers. In fact, James, the British officer in charge of leading the team, had limited command of the army. Once he entered the Transvaal Republic, he began to do his own thing. The sneak attack that was originally prepared suddenly turned into a strong attack. Unsurprisingly, the arrogant British army suffered a crushing defeat and was almost wiped out by the Boer Kruger. Kruger, as anyone who knows about the Anglo-Boer War, knows that he led tens of thousands of Boer troops and more than 200,000 British troops to smile bitterly in South Africa for 3 years. Even if you lose in the end, you are still proud. A group of rabble, in the face of a famous general, go up to attack stupidly, and the result is self-evident. An army of 3,000 people was killed by the Boers, more than 800 people were killed, and more than 1,300 people were captured. In the end, less than 600 people managed to escape. By this time, there was no need for Ferdinand to do anything more. Blood is the best catalyst. If the British can tolerate such a failure, the name of the world's hegemony will be in vain. A full-scale war between the British and the Cloth is imminent. Chapter 158. The outbreak of the Anglo-Boers War. In line with the principle of blocking the British, the Germans and French expressed their willingness to support the Boers. As the Dutch, the homeland of the Boers, they even formed a volunteer army at home and prepared to go to South Africa to participate in the war. These actions of European countries have brought the confidence of defeating the British invasion to the Transvaal Republic, but also brought disaster. The Boers decided that, instead of compromising with the British, they began to prepare for the war, preparing to use force to expel the British invaders. The Boers may lack other things, but they are not lacking in gold. They sensed the danger and frantically purchased weapons from European countries and trained soldiers. The war was about to break out, and Britain could no longer tolerate it. With the efforts of the capitalists, the quarrelsome Congress finally passed a resolution to launch a full-scale war against the Boers. At the end of 1895, the British Army began to build up to the 2 Boer republics, Transvaal and Orange. At the beginning of the war, the British Army consisted of about 30,000 people. It used a recruitment system to supplement its troops. The weapons were outdated, the training was poor, and the discipline was lax. Obviously, the British underestimated the strength of the Boers, and sent a group of rabble to the battlefield directly, and suffered a big loss in the early days of the war. The ending has nothing to do with Ferdinand. The actions of the British South Africa have aroused the dissatisfaction of European countries, especially the Germans. Although they did not support the Boers, they sold weapons and equipment and helped train soldiers. The sudden outbreak of the Anglo-Boers War has successfully diverted the attention of the British. The conflict between Britain and Germany, Britain and France intensified, and the plan of the Marquis of Salisbury came to an end. Ferdinand's goal has been reached, but he knows that South Africa is a quagmire, and the Boers are not so easy to mess with. Now there are Germans and French as wet nurses for them, and life is much better than during the Anglo-Boer War in history. Historically, the Anglo-Boers War has been fought for 3 years. At this time, there are a large number of nurses, and the preparations of the British are not as complete as in history. Historically, the Germans abandoned the Boers as a result of the Anglo-German compromise on the partition of the South African colony. The British wooed the Portuguese and cut off the land supply line from the Portuguese colonies. The Royal Navy took advantage of the Portuguese naval port in Mozambique to seal the Gulf of Dragoa and cut off the only port for the Boers to go to sea. Opportunities for supplies from the outside world. Under a series of unfavorable factors, the Boers could only fight alone, persisting for 3 years, and finally failed. None of this has happened yet. When the Anglo-Boers War broke out, the Germans, French, Dutch, etc., ships from European countries continued to enter and exit Dragoa Bay. Ships of strategic materials were sold to the Boers. The British government is powerless to do anything about it. Obviously, European countries do not want the British to get South Africa easily. If the contradiction between Germany and France is not too great, it is time for the two countries to join hands to intervene. Even so, the two countries have reached a tacit understanding that the British cannot easily obtain South Africa. In the era of the gold standard, whoever has gold in his hands will dominate the world finance, and South Africa is precisely the most critical part of it. Directly working with the empire of never-setting sun, and before reaching that level, there is no pressure for everyone to stumble a little. In January 1895, the German consul publicly expressed his support for the Transvaal Republic to take tough measures against the British. After the failure of the invasion of the British African Colonial Army, William II personally sent a congratulatory message to President Transvaal Kruger, congratulating them, relying solely on his own strength, smashed a bandit invasion. The French Gazette also published the French government's attitude towards the Boers. The French Republic is willing to support the Transvaal Republic and oppose the British colonial rule. The editor-in-chief of Le Figaro even put the Boers' resistance to the British invasion together with the American independence movement, calling on the French people to donate to the Boers and support the Boers to continue their efforts for national independence. The Dutch Telegraph, in addition to calling on the Dutch people to donate, also directly solicited volunteers from all over the world, preparing to use practical actions to resist the British riots. If only from the point of view of public opinion. The British are angry this time. From Western Europe to Eastern Europe, the media of various countries are slamming the British, calling on the world to unite to organize the British atrocities in South Africa. In essence, what should I do? At most, it is to fool a few hot-blooded young people and go to the South African battlefield to fight with the British. Or sell all kinds of supplies to the Boers and make a lot of gold. It is estimated that except for the Dutch who are really angry, other countries are for the benefit of the British. Not only that, but the pressure of public opinion is still useful. At least during the Anglo-Boer War, the British's trade exports to Europe dropped by 10%. The trade exports to the Netherlands dropped to a history of more than 10 years, the lowest point, less than 1/3 of the heyday. Ferdinand knew that this might be the core factor behind the collective opposition to Britain across Europe. The United Kingdom has suffered a lot, and the consequences of not having allies are fully exposed. Even the world's most powerful country is powerless to prevent the European continent from collectively stumbling. This also paved the way for the British to abandon non-aligned diplomacy and implement a new diplomatic strategy. In order to be able to cut off the logistical supply line of the Boers and block the blood transfusion to it from the European continent, the British Foreign Office found the Portuguese, hoping to get support, but unfortunately it is not so easy now. The Germans, the French, and the Spaniards said, "We don't agree." In the face of pressure from various countries, the Portuguese did not dare to express their position easily, and they hesitated to declare neutrality again and again. They can withstand the pressure of other countries. The Spaniards moved to increase troops on the border, terrified the Portuguese. Everyone understands the actions of the Spaniards. The British rose up on the bones of the Armada, not to mention the lost colonies, and they still occupy the Strait of Gibraltar. The Spaniards have no strength and are looking for the bad luck of the British. But it is no problem to teach the Portuguese, who have gone out independently, and this time there are European countries to support them later. Moreover, before the Spanish-American War, Spain was still the #1 power in Europe, and it was on the same level as Italy. Historically, in 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out, and the Spaniards did not have the energy to interfere with the Portuguese moving closer to the United Kingdom. Now the conflict between the United States and Spain has not intensified, and the war is even less of a problem. Under the intervention of European countries, the Portuguese expressed their neutrality very well. The Portuguese pretended not to see the merchant ships carrying arms from various countries, But they were determined not to lie in this muddy water anyway. The British plan to use Portugal's financial crisis to force Portugal to compromise has not yet begun to fail. French loan sharks have long sharpened their knives and have made it clear that they are willing to lend to Portugal. Chapter 159, Debut in Italy. One wave island not flat, another wave is rising. The alternative Italy among the powers jumped out again. As Bismarck described, the teeth are worm-eaten, but the appetite is not small. Since July 17, 1894, Italy invaded Ethiopia and occupied Tigre in the north. In March 1895, Italy continued to launch a war of aggression and occupied Adigara, Etowah and other places. If you think this is the end, that's too much to underestimate our Italian appetite. At the same time as the invasion of Ethiopia, the Italians were also very interested in the British plan to divide up Turkey. However, the Italians have a bigger appetite. In the British plan, Albania was added, and the British agreed. However, this obviously aroused the dissatisfaction of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and this hand reached out to his own backyard. Does Albania matter? In essence, for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that's what happened. Not worth mentioning. In the hands of the fading Ottoman Empire, it can be independent, and Austria-Hungary has no plans to annex Albania. But the premise is that it cannot fall into the hands of foreign powers, which will weaken the influence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the Balkans. In the Balkans, it is enough to have the Austro-Hungarian Empire as a great power, and it is enough for the Russian Empire to stretch out a tentacle. It is a European road roller, and labor and capital have to endure it. What qualifications do you have in Italy? Could it be that just because you are allies, I can tolerate you reaching into my back garden? The Germans were also dissatisfied. Baron Holstein believed that it was the British who created conflicts in the German-Austrian-Italian tripartite alliance, thereby disintegrating the tri-power alliance. So he instructed the German representative to express that Germany had no interest in the Near East and refused to participate. The British planned to divide Turkey. Without the participation of the Germans, the Austro-Hungarian Empire naturally also withdrew. The Italians are still inseparable from the support of the Germans, and reluctantly expressed their non-participation. Don't worry, things in Italy are not over yet. Although Ethiopia is a weak chicken, it depends on who to compare with. Against the European powers, or ordinary European countries, the Ethiopian army is really not good. But if you encounter an alternative among the powers like Italy, everything will be different. At the beginning, the Ethiopian government was frightened by the name of the Italian powers and retreated step by step, and finally the Ethiopian government could no longer bear it. On September 17, 1895, the Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II published the edict to the people, which shocked the world. Don't get me wrong, the edict itself can only be said to be quite satisfactory, but the influence it caused afterward shocked the world. Italy has set another world record, a record that can only be broken by the Italians themselves. On December 7, 1895, Duke Makonnen commanded 30,000 Ethiopian troops to conduct a decisive battle with the Italian troops in Pingding Mountain, Araji. The result shocked the world. For the first time, the Egyptian army recreated the creative army on the Pingding Mountain of Araji, annihilated 2,400 people, and recovered Merkel in January of the following year. The Italians were defeated so neatly. This is not over yet. On March 1, 1896, the Battle of Adua broke out. Menelik II personally led an army of 100,000 troops to fight the Italian army again in Adua. There is no doubt that the Italian army played at a normal level this time. Unsurprisingly, the Italian army was defeated again, but his casualty rate is the highest in the Italian wars. It can be seen that the Italians are not really that incompetent. They will also work hard. The Egyptian army used the tactics of interspersed and divided. Each attack, combined frontal assault and flank detours, annihilated 17,000 enemies, more than 12,000 people were killed and wounded, and more than 4,000 people were captured, and seized a large number of weapons and equipment. After the Battle of Adua, Italy was unable to fight again, and was forced to conclude the Addis Ababa peace treaty with Egypt in October of the same year. Recognize Ethiopia's independence and pay 10 million liras in reparations. This war was the first victory for the African people in modern times against the colonialist invasion. Well, none of this is the point. There are not a few examples of failed invasions by foreign powers. The Italians were simply defeated a little bit. The point is that the Italians actually conceded defeat. It was already a shame to lose, but as long as you win back later and win the final victory, it's no big deal. The Anglo-Boer War is an example. No matter how much the losses were, the British persevered. In the end, they exhausted the Boers to death and won the war, without compromising the reputation of the empire on which the sun never sets. But the Italian government didn't know what was going on, and was actually frightened. It directly conceded defeat to Ethiopia, recognized Ethiopia's independence, and paid 10 million liras of war reparations. The Italian government cannot be completely blamed either. The Crispi government fell after the defeat of the war, and there is no chance for revenge. Not to mention the new government, knowing that Ethiopia is a hard bone, why should it be chewed? Isn't keeping it just to show the incompetence of the previous government. Only when there is contrast can there be harm. Only the incompetence of the previous session can bring out the shrewdness and ability of this session. Why risk failure to wipe the ass of the previous government? This is incredible. The European powers can't beat the African chiefs. The whole world is watching the Italian joke, hence the name Italian Pasta Army. Ferdinand knew that the consequences were more than that. After this battle, the soul of the Italian army was gone. Any country in Europe is fighting against the Italian army. As long as you think that the Italian army can't even handle the African chiefs, the morale will be high and the combat effectiveness will be bursting. Then in the next Europa Universalis, the Italian army has always been the role of soy sauce, always the enemy's favorite opponent, and the Allies' most troublesome teammate. In any case, the Italians did a good thing and successfully attracted the attention of the powers. The aftermath of the Bulgarian War was suppressed, in line with Ferdinand's low-key personality. It's not so easy for the British to admit defeat. The Triple Alliance did not pass, isn't it the Franco-Russian alliance? In this era, the Franco-Russian alliance still has the advantage over the three-nation alliance. As long as the support of France and Russia is obtained, the purpose of the British to stabilize the rear can still be accomplished. It is a pity that the French are not interested in the Armenian issue. Gabriel Arnaud, the French foreign minister who served in Constantinople, said, "Without the intervention of the foreign powers, the Armenian issue will be better resolved." The attitude of the French is obvious. They have no interest in carving up the Ottoman Empire. At most, they have some economic interests. The Armenian issue has chosen to stand with its ally, the Russians, diplomatically. Chapter 160, The Great Bulgarian. The British fled in Paris, did not get the desired result, and turned their attention to St. Petersburg in an attempt to gain the support of the Russians. The Russians are still very respectful and agreed to participate in the investigative committee organized by the British, but their attitude on the Armenian issue is completely different from the British. Nicholas II expressed no interest in the slaughter of Armenians by the Ottoman Empire. The Russian Empire has done much more than the Turks. The Russians are most concerned about the Black Sea Strait, but after the last Russo-Turkish War, the Russian government's strategy changed, shifting its focus eastward, and it became even more evident after Nicholas II came to power. The Russian Empire can tolerate this important point, and it is in the hands of the declining Ottoman Empire, or in the hands of any weak country. Even after the Bulgarian War, the support for the Bulgarians to control the Black Sea Strait is not low. In history, Russia once supported Bulgaria to seize Constantinople. However, Ferdinand was not sure whether this was a test by the Russian government on Bulgaria. In line with safety first, he refused on the grounds that Bulgaria's soy sauce navy was not strong enough. Obviously, the British plan has failed again. The Russians really coveted Constantinople, but after many consecutive failures, the Russian government did not trust the British and suspected that the British had bad intentions. What's more, Russia's Far East strategy is now at a critical moment. The British supported Japan during the Sino-Japanese War. Nicholas II believed that the importance of the Far East strategy was far higher than the Armenian issue. Nicholas II made the same judgment as history. He believed that the British wanted to destroy the Russian Empire's Far East strategy and wanted to use the Near East crisis to tie the hands and feet of the Russian Empire. What's more, the Russian Empire now has a younger brother, and there is a Bulgarian thug in the Balkans. Even if an accident occurs, it is still under control. The attitude of the Russian Empire completely declared the bankruptcy of the British Near East policy. Due to the different attitudes of the foreign powers, their interference in Armenia's problems had little effect. In April 1895, the British, French and Russian ambassadors to Turkey jointly drafted the Armenian Province Reform Plan. This plan is very moderate and the content of the reform is very limited. But it was still opposed by the Russian Foreign Minister, Lobanov, claiming that the Armenians will not be satisfied unless reforms are carried out in the entire Turkish Asian region. Lobanov's decision, Ferdinand couldn't help but praise him. It is really beautiful. The Russian Empire is equivalent to standing in the position of Sudan, and the British's Near East policy has collapsed. Due to the outbreak of the Anglo-Boers War in South Africa and the intensification of the Anglo-German conflict, the Germans clearly refused to participate in the British Near East strategy. As for intervening alone, fine. The Royal Navy of the British Empire is number one in the world. Army, it's just so-so. While suppressing the vast colony, it can also launch an attack on the Boers, which is already a super-level performance. If you come over and fight the Ottoman Empire one-on-one, it will be impossible for anyone to fight. If other powers make another black hand, they might not be able to keep Egypt that has already got it. It was only when Ferdinand got here that he breathed a sigh of relief. Since he succeeded to the throne, the biggest crisis in Bulgaria has passed in such turbulent waves. Looking back at the country, although the Bulgarian War is over, the problems in the later period still exist. In 1894, because of the outbreak of war, the Bulgarian government invested a total of hundreds of millions of funds. In addition to the cost of war, the biggest expenditure was spent on public relations. Fortunately, the military made a fortune in Serbia and made up for the loss. Later, the pension was paid off with land. Saved tens of millions of dollars. Otherwise the government would now have to consider selling real estate to get by. There are not many people in the newly added land. How much is the so-called real estate worth? In addition to land, the real estate in the city, it is estimated that the price of cabbage cannot be sold. No matter how cheap it is, someone has to buy it. Even so, Bulgaria's financial situation is still very bad. In order to raise money, the cabinet is almost worried. The second 5-year plan must continue to be carried out, and the delayed progress must be caught up. The newly added land needs to be developed, immigrants need to be introduced, and the railway network and highway network must be extended. These all require a lot of capital investment. Fortunately, the immigrants introduced by Ferdinand at the beginning were all honest farmers, and there was no mess. Otherwise, the Bulgarian government will really fry the pot now. The Armenian issue has also frightened a lot of people, including the Bulgarian government. Fortunately, the Serbs were sent back, otherwise there might be trouble someday. In this regard, the Bulgarians themselves are experienced, and there are many people in the government who have participated in the Bulgarian independence movement. For these businesses, everyone knows what is going on. Now the primary and secondary header topic, the butt determines the head. The Armenians are fighting for independence in the Ottoman Empire, and everyone is sympathetic and supportive. But if someone wants to come once in Bulgaria, then the attitude is different, and it must be avoided in the cradle. The Bulgarianization strategy proposed by Ferdinand has been implemented more rapidly, and the government has introduced a series of supporting policies. For example, restrictions are set for the naturalization of non-Bulgarians, except for senior talents. Bulgarians are given priority in terms of education, medical care, etc. The government gives priority to hiring Bulgarians as public officials. What's even more bizarre is that this Bulgarian is no longer a traditional Bulgarian, and he is not divided by blood. As long as you consider yourself a Bulgarian, and are willing to accept the rule of the Bulgarian government and learn Bulgarian language and culture, you are a Bulgarian. Simply put, every Bulgarian can be a Bulgarian. No matter what ethnicity you are, you can be a Bulgarian, even if you have dark skin or yellow skin, as long as you recognize everything in Bulgaria and are willing to give up your original racial identity. The Bulgarian government will treat you equally and never engage in racial discrimination. In a broad sense, the Bulgarian government is playing down the concept of a nation, and uses language and national customs to divide the same ethnic group in a broad sense. Perhaps Bulgarians are more appropriate to call them. Anyway, Bulgarians are also mixed races. From ancient times to the present, for thousands of years, no one knows how many ethnic bloodlines are flowing in their bodies. If they create a big Bulgarian, there is no pressure on everyone. Chapter 161, The Bulgarian Government That Lacks Money. Ferdinand had no opinion on the government's innovation. He will support any policy that promotes ethnic integration. Can the various ethnic groups in Bulgaria be integrated now? According to Ferdinand, there is absolutely no problem. Religious beliefs, languages, and ethnic customs are basically the same. As long as there is a voice telling them that everyone is one ethnic group, the fake will become real after a long time. Originally, there were few ethnic minorities in Bulgaria. After immigration from Russia, the number of new Bulgarians increased sharply, including Ukrainians, Poles, Slavs, Armenians. Dozens of ethnic groups, large and small. But now they are all Bulgarians, and they are scattered among the crowd. Who can tell them apart? Well, in fact, after a long period of time, which ethnic group I belong to, these honest and friendly peasants can't figure out which ethnic group they are. You read that right. When nationalism broke out at the end of the 19th century, many peasants who were literate and illiterate were racialized. So occasionally open the history book, you will find that some ethnic groups suddenly have a sudden increase in population, and some ethnic groups suddenly have a sudden population decline, which is often assimilated. In any case, so far, Bulgaria's national integration policy has been very successful. Immigrants are often more like Bulgarians than real Bulgarians. Who dares to say that they are not Bulgarians? They can turn their faces immediately. In this regard, Ferdinand would like to thank the Russian aristocratic gentlemen. These are their credit. If it wasn't for their hard work day and night, desperately squeezing to death, these immigrants wouldn't be so quick to have such a strong sense of identification with Bulgaria. The Bulgarian War is the best example. When Bulgaria was mobilized, immigrants who had just obtained Bulgarian nationality had no low enthusiasm for enrolling in the army. In order to rush to produce strategic materials, the Bulgarian factory chose to work overtime irregularly, and they are not behind. They are doing their best to integrate into this society. Of course, there will still be conflicts between immigrants and local residents, but with the victory of the Bulgarian War, everything disappeared. The initial immigrants have passed practical actions and won everyone's approval. At the cabinet meeting, Constantine asked with a headache, "Mr. Kennedy, according to the government's plan, how much will we have a fiscal deficit this year?" The Chancellor of the Exchequer Kennedy, after thinking about it, said, "To complete all of the government's plans, according to the most optimistic estimate, there will be at least a fiscal deficit of 50 million levs." Constantine nodded. This number was still within the expected range. According to the original plan, the second batch of treasury bonds should now be issued, but now everyone obviously has not mentioned it. We still know how the national debts were sold last year. Even if the Bulgarian people are patriotic, they will not be able to get the money now. The capitalists don't even need to consider that last year's Bulgarian war also delayed everyone's business for 2 months, and the capitalists suffered a lot of losses. After the victory of the war, the Bulgarian government did not have so much money to compensate, and it was only a few big capitalists who took the lead in giving up the compensation to save face for the government. For this, everyone was moved for a long time. In the end, in the name of the government, everyone was given a plaque. At this moment, no one thought of continuing to fight their ideas. Loans to foreign powers. Constantine immediately dismissed this idea. The key is that these years, The appetite of the foreign powers is not small, and the interest is nothing, but the additional conditions can definitely make people want to cry. Constantine asked, "What good ideas do you have? It can solve the financial crisis. Why don't we fight corruption again? We can clean up the worms and raise funds, killing two birds with one stone." Chekhov thought for a while and said. Everyone nodded. The family of the Bulgarian government. They are all obtained by copying. Everyone is familiar with this business. Anti-corruption. If the corrupt officials are caught and their homes are raided, the Bulgarian government has no time to analyze what is illegal and what is legal. As long as a corrupt official catches one, they will be beaten to death with one stick, and all their property will be confiscated. Relatives within 5 generations must examine their property history, and if they find that they are hiding, they must also sit together. Accepting bribes is still legal income for officials in Bulgaria. As long as the anti-corruption department reports, you can get 1/10 of the reward. As for the bribers, of course, they have been unlucky for 8 lifetimes. They ransack their homes according to the old rules. Who makes the Bulgarian government poor? As far as Ferdinand knows, the central government alone has promulgated hundreds of laws and regulations on home raiding, and many crimes of a vile nature have been added later. In order to raise money, the Bulgarian government has exhausted its efforts. The local government also has a lot of provisions on fines, such as littering and spitting. For the first offense, the fine is the offender's one-day income, the second time doubles, and so on. If there is no income, the average income is calculated. Even so, the Bulgarian government still faces a financial crisis. The Chancellor of the Exchequer questioned, "I have no opinion on anti-corruption. The problem is anti-corruption. We often do it. Now it's good to catch a few small fish. If you want to solve the funding gap, I'm afraid it's a drop in the bucket." Everyone smiled awkwardly, didn't they? In order to raise money, the Bulgarian government may be the most active place in the world to fight corruption, and it is possible to come every once in a while. Now the Bulgarian government can proudly announce that they are now the cleanest government in the world. No matter how daring the officials are, they must have room to play. Now Bulgarian officials are notorious for taking money and not doing anything, and they will send you to jail when they are done. Which idiot still dares to give them gifts? Whether it's good or bad, they don't have to judge for themselves. Anyway, in terms of civil reputation, the Bulgarian government has surpassed all previous governments since independence. Constantine thought for a while, and said reluctantly, "If there is really no way, we can only sell the land in the country." Kennedy's expression changed. "You must know that the land in the hands of the government is already one of the main income of the government. This income has always been calculated independently of the fiscal revenue, mainly used for military expenses. If the land is sold now, the income in the coming year will be greatly reduced. No, Your Excellency Prime Minister, you should be aware that we are now earning hundreds of millions of leva each year from the land, which is directly allocated to the army. Now that we have sold a large area of land, our income will be greatly reduced in the coming year. What should we do with military expenditures?" Kennedy asked. Chapter 162, Fiscal Deficit. In fact, Kennedy is not really against the sale of land. You must know that in addition to the previously confiscated land, the government has also harvested a lot of land in the new territories. Now there is a lot of land in the hands of the Bulgarian government. Even if part of the land is sold, it can still be compensated for with the development of new land. But this involves the military, especially at the end of the Bulgarian War. The government sells land for military expenses, which can easily create an illusion to the outside world that the Bulgarian government is suppressing the military. Once this illusion is created, the political consequences are often disastrous. The military of various countries in the Balkans are not soft persimmons. Don't look at the fact that the Bulgarian army seems to be very obedient now. It was all made by Ferdinand with money. Now Bulgaria's annual military expenditure has tripled compared to before 1888, and it is much higher than the government's revenue at that time. In fact, the military expenditure of the Balkan countries is almost no less than half of the fiscal revenue. On the face of it, the Bulgarian government allocates only 20% of the fiscal revenue every year. This is not enough for half of the military expenditure. The rest is borne by the government and Chinese enterprises. The profits from the land are borne by the government, the vast majority. Now the annual income of the Bulgarian government from the land and its surrounding area is as high as more than 90 million levs, and the cabinet has not seen the money before throwing it into the mouth of the gold-swallowing beast of military spending. You must know that in 1893, the fiscal revenue of the Bulgarian government was only 164 million leva. In 1894, due to the influence of the war, the growth of fiscal revenue slowed down to only 172 million leva. In 1895, the war dividend was harvested, which stimulated economic development and financial. The ministry has optimistic estimates that revenue could surpass the 200 million lev mark. But military expenditures were 134 million levs in 1893. When the war broke out in 1894, military expenditures reached 220 million levs. In 1895, it dropped to 147 million levs. No way, this is still the compulsory military service system. Otherwise the cost will increase by 20 to 30%. This is still based on the premise that every division in Bulgaria is now dissatisfied with the editor. The Bulgarian army has a German defense system, with each full division of more than 17,000 people. Each of the 6 main divisions has only more than 7,000 people, and the military expenditure of each division is as high as more than 13 million leva. The 6 new divisions each have more than 13,000 people, and the military expenditure of each division exceeds 710,000 levs, more than 8,000 guards. The military expenditure is as high as more than 20 million levs. The main reason why new divisions are cheap is that soldiers are obliged to do military service, so they don't have to pay salaries, and their weapons and equipment are not as good as the main divisions, which greatly saves money. Otherwise, the salary of more than 13,000 people will have to pay more than 10 million levs. It is not surprising why the salaries of soldiers are not high. Those who have been in the army know that there are very few expenses in the army. The army is responsible for food, clothing, housing and transportation, and basically what they get is the actual income. This is also the purpose of Ferdinand's keenness to expand the new editorial division. It is simply that the main division is too expensive, and Bulgaria cannot afford it. Forced to do so, Ferdinand had no choice but to raise officers. The Bulgarian army now has a reserve of officers ready to triple its troops at any time. On the surface, the current minimum wage in Bulgaria is 75 levs, about £3 per month. In fact, after deducting the cost of food, lodging, and clothing, only 2/3 of the workers can actually get it. You may only get half of it when you encounter a black-hearted boss. This is also the result of the government's intention to protect vulnerable groups. Otherwise, capitalists can trick workers to death by relying on loopholes in contracts. The older capitalists are fine. They know they need to pay attention to their appearance, and the government is keeping an eye on them. The most pitiful is the upstart small bosses, and it is difficult to see the good qualities of the Bulgarians in them. It's because they caught one pit in one, and after the government cracked down, they turned to pit immigrants. Constantine was silent, trying to persuade the military to agree to sell the government-owned land. Unless the government agrees to increase the allocation ratio of military spending, the military will definitely not agree. However, increasing the proportion of military expenditure and fiscal revenue will make the government suffer even more. The growth rate of income from land is negligible, but the fiscal revenue of the Bulgarian government is growing rapidly. It is easy to increase the proportion of military expenditure, but it is difficult to reduce it. There is not much difference in the Balkans, that is, there are many wars. Constantine does not think he can do it if he wants to reduce military expenditure. They are all sitting at the top of the government, and it is very clear that Bulgaria's next strategic goal is the Ottoman Empire. It is no problem to increase military spending in the short term, and they are willing to allocate special military spending during wartime. However, the long-term increase in the proportion of military expenditure is very troublesome. You must know that, in order to reduce the proportion of military expenditure, the government's land, such a large piece of fat, was thrown out without hesitation by the cabinet before, just for long-term consideration. Chekhov thought for a while and said, "This matter is too big, let's report it to the Grand Duke for a decision." Everyone nodded. Now Ferdinand is in full swing in Bulgaria, on big issues. Without his nod, it is impossible to pass. Ferdinand, who worked hard in Sophia's palace and tried to make people, didn't know that trouble came again. You must know that since 1892, half of the problems of the Bulgarian government have been financial. Can only say, there is absolutely no money in this world. Ferdinand deeply realized the essence of this sentence. Before the time travel, he was a poor diocese, and he ran around for money. After the time travel, he was rich and rich. He thought he could get rid of the troubles of money, but he still had to work hard to make money. After becoming a king, after a few years of comfortable life, I was worried about money again, and I still have no end of worry. After listening to the introduction of Prime Minister Constantine, Ferdinand immediately knew that it was going to be bad, and the Bulgarian government was short of money again. For the cabinet's proposal, Ferdinand did not hesitate to reject it. In any case, the Ottoman Empire is about to be attacked, and the government cannot do anything that might attack the morale of the military. Even if the land is to be sold, it can only be considered after the war is over. As for the government's lack of money, Ferdinand decided to play tricks on the French, and the name of the usury empire was not for nothing. With the victory of the Bulgarian War, the international credit strength of the Bulgarian government has been raised to a new level. If it is really not possible, you can ask the Russian Empire to come forward to guarantee it. The government funding gap, for Bulgaria, may be astronomical, but for the usury empire of France, it is a drop in the bucket. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Loans. Thinking back to 20 years ago, the Franco-Prussian War caused economic losses of more than 20 billion francs to France, and the war reparations had to pay more than 5 billion francs. The Germans' attempt to use the war reparations to drag over France was over as soon as it started. After the war, a bourgeois revolution broke out in France. After a fierce battle, there are still people who can come up with enough funds to restore their vitality, and you can see the heritage of the old empire. Ferdinand set his sights on France. The main reason is that after the Franco-Prussian War, the newly established French Republic went further and further on the road of usury empire. The second is the existence of the Russia-Belgium and the Franco-Russian alliance. Bulgaria has always been tacitly regarded as Russia's sphere of influence internationally. Even if France puts forward conditions, it will mostly be within the economic scope, and it is unlikely to destroy the French-Russian relationship for Bulgaria. At the end of the 19th century, when the Franco-Russian alliance was established, the French demanded far more from the Russians than the Russians demanded of the French. Therefore, in the international arena, many times the French have to take into account the attitude of Russia. Before 1905, the Russian Empire had been in its heyday, the Franco-Russian alliance had suppressed the Triple Alliance, and the British had always been in favor of the Germans. Until the Russo-Japanese War, the weak nature of the Russian Empire was exposed, and the strengths of the two sides were reversed. In order to suppress the rising Germans, the British's continental balance foreign policy changed and they joined the Entente. Ferdinand also knew that even so, borrowing money from France is not so simple. The French do not open charity halls, and additional conditions are absolutely indispensable. What is the government's fiscal gap for the next 3 years now? Ferdinand asked. Chancellor of the Exchequer Kennedy's expression changed, and he wanted to say, "Your Majesty, you are playing your cards against common sense. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't we ask what the current fiscal gap is?" Kennedy thought about it for a moment, then said hesitantly, "Grand Duke, the fiscal deficit this year will be around 50 million leva. and the budget deficit for next year and the year after is initially estimated to be between 150 million leva and 200 million leva, between if. These are all built behind the government, no new construction projects, and no war. Ferdinand nodded. In fact, the period of the second five-year plan was the most difficult period for Bulgaria's finances. Once this pass was passed, the government's fiscal revenue would experience explosive growth. What's more, there was another war on the Sierra Leone, which increased the cost of the war, and expanded the scope of the implementation of the second five-year plan. Naturally, the financial expenditure will rise rapidly. If you take into account that the Greece-Turkish war is coming, and Ferdinand wants to swallow an elephant again, then the cost of the war is definitely an astronomical figure. After thinking about it, Ferdinand asked, then if, during this period, we had a war with the Ottoman Empire, and taking the war expenses into account, how big is our financial gap? Everyone's face changed slightly. They knew that Ferdinand was planning to go to war with the Ottoman Empire. Seeing that the Chancellor of the Exchequer stayed there with a dumbfounded expression, Ferdinand knew that he had made a blunder. Even if you want to calculate the war expenses, you must first find the military and calculate it according to a series of comprehensive factors such as the strategic plan, the scale of the war, the number of mobilized people, etc. It is too embarrassing to ask the Ministry of Finance to calculate the cost of the war without knowing anything. And even if the scale of the war is a local conflict or a full-scale war has not yet been determined. Ferdinand laughed and added, of course, I'm not asking you to tell me now. Come down and contact the Ministry of Finance and the General Staff, estimate a rough figure, and report it to me. In addition, the Prime Minister's government will now prepare strategic material reserves in advance. We must ensure that in the event of an emergency, we can support an army of 300,000 people. A strategic reserve that continues to fight for more than a year. Constantine was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted and said hesitantly, Grand Duke, I'm afraid this will be difficult. We have already started the preparations for combat, but now the government is in financial difficulties. We still lack sufficient funds. Well, the final difficulty comes back to the word money. In fact, without making a detailed budget, Ferdinand can roughly judge the next funding gap in Bulgaria. To detonate the Balkan War in advance, and ensure victory, and take into account domestic construction, it is impossible to fight without 4 or 5 billion levs. After thinking about it, Ferdinand said without doubt, in this case, the Ministry of Finance and the banking group of various countries will contact and discuss the borrowing conditions. This time the funding gap is too large, so prepare to borrow from various countries. Ferdinand's emperor's mind has become more and more powerful, and now he can send and receive freely and hide his thoughts at will. Even though it has been decided to take out a loan from France, there is still no sign of inclination. As the Prime Minister, Constantine felt the most obvious. He had clearly found that Ferdinand's power was getting stronger and stronger. In many cases, once a decision was made, no one could change it. This is both good and bad. The good aspects can increase the awe of the subordinates, and the bad aspects are easy to be used by yourself, which is also a common problem of emperors. No one can say what the final result will be. Anyway, Ferdinand's order was quickly carried out. Since the Berlin Conference in 1878, the Balkan countries have set their sights on parts of the Ottoman Empire in Europe. The Austro-Hungarian Empire took the lead in including Bosnia and Herzegovina. Greece, Bulgaria and Serbia have extended their tentacles into the Macedonia region, and the governments of the three countries are all expanding their schools and churches. In this regard, Bulgaria has come to the forefront. Since the end of the 19th century, 25% of the Bulgarian government's fiscal revenue has been used to carry out work in the Macedonia region. In 1885, 306 schools were established in Macedonia. In 1890, the number increased to 871. By the end of 1890, Serbia and Greece had only more than 200 schools each, and were left far behind by the Bulgarians. At the same time, the three countries of Batu, Greece, and Cyprus all fought fiercely for the schools and churches they founded. Such church schools are usually organized by consuls of the three countries and accept their supervision. During this period, the Serbs began to openly promote the idea of Macedonian separatism because of fear of Bulgaria's monopoly on Macedonia. Serbia is so eager to expand. The main reason is the pressure from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Chapter 164, The Situation in the Balkans. At the end of the 19th century, as the Austro-Hungarian Empire continued to infiltrate Serbia, people of insight in Serbia believed that if Serbia did not expand into the Aegean Sea, it would sooner or later be annexed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Therefore, Serbia adopted a radical expansion policy, including propagating national separatism to various places, and a series of messy ideas, which also paved the way for the subsequent disintegration of Yugoslavia. In addition to the Macedonia region, countries are also infiltrating other regions. The most famous ones are the Greater Bulgarian Plan and the Greater Serbian Plan. Of course, the Greater Greece Plan and the Gate Negro Plan are also indispensable. The Greater Bulgaria Project, a Bulgarian nationalist ideology aimed at restoring the largest frontier in Bulgarian history. Of course, the Bulgarians were not stupid enough to really want to restore the largest territory in history. When it was time to give up, they chose to give up. The range of targets set includes the plains between the Danube and the Balkan Mountains, North and South Dobroga, Sofia, Pirat, Vranj, North Thrace, parts of East Thrace, Macedonia and other areas. The main targets were all aimed at the Turks, and there was no foolishness to encircle Austria-Hungary, Greece and other countries, and even so, it was beyond the scope of Bulgaria's ability at that time. The Greater Serbia Plan is interesting. It is also Greater Serbia, a concept of national unity put forward by Serbian nationalists. Well, the basic goal is to unify areas where Serbs are inhabited, and there are requirements for areas where Serbs are a minority. This area is difficult to define, and advocates the creation of a larger Serbian state in the Western Balkans and southeastern Europe. The latter was even worse. At the end of the 19th century, when the power of the radicals expanded, the nation included the entire Yugoslav nation. As far as the most basic goals are concerned, the regional area includes Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania, Macedonia, Croatia, Slovenia and so on. According to the goals of the activists, the small Balkan region can no longer accommodate Serbia. Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Austria are all involved, and they are even interested in Moldova. Not necessarily accurate, from Baidu, for reference only of course. These activists are only a minority among the minority, and they are radicalism within radicalism, which can be understood as madness. This is not a big deal, and there are Slavic peoples who are influenced by Pan-Slavism and openly advocate the unification of the world. You read that right. After the establishment of Yugoslavia after World War I, some people advocated the unification of the Slavic nations of the world and the establishment of the Great Slavic Empire with the Serbs as the core. Even the great strategic idea of unifying the Soviet Union has come out. Well, just take it as a joke. What country doesn't have a few lunatics? In Serbia in that era, there were just more lunatics. Blind nationalism without economic and military strength and international support can only have disastrous consequences. Greater Serbia eventually became the trigger for the outbreak of World War I! The Greeks still have self-awareness. Perhaps the First Greek-Turkish War woke up the Greek nationalists. The Great Greek Plan was just a dream. They shouted twice, and when they felt tired, they stopped shouting. The Negro Plan of the Gate, the establishment of Yugoslavia, was realized for a time, but he belonged to the unified one, and it was completed anyway, right? Maybe I think this result is not so wonderful, and later became independent. But all of this has undergone fundamental changes in this time and space, under Ferdinand's butterfly effect. Of course, these plans still exist, but as soon as the Great Serbia Plan was announced, it died prematurely. In the Balkan situation before 1892, basically the same as the parallel time and space, there is not much change. The most is that the Bulgarian government has built a little more church schools outside, and the scope is a little wider. Since the establishment of the Bulgarian-Russian alliance, history has turned a turning point here. First, Ferdinand provoked an arms race in the Balkans, and the economic crisis that followed was destructive, a little bit bigger. Then, starting in 1893, due to financial reasons, the Greek and Serbian governments were forced to stop their expansion in Macedonia. After the Bulgarian War, Serbia directly shut down most Serbian schools and churches. Time has entered 1895. Serbia, which was originally ambitious, is now licking its wounds and has no energy to come out to make a difference. Now the most active is Montenegro, which is working hard to establish the Kingdom of Montenegro. George I of Greece was still hiding in the dark, looking for an opportunity to give the Ottoman Empire sap, similar to Ferdinand's idea. The two sides tacitly exported the revolution to the Ottoman Empire. Although Ferdinand lit a fire, if the Greek government did not cooperate, the Greeks in Turkey would never be so violent now. Macedonians relied on Serbs before 1860, and then turned to Bulgarians. The main factor for this reason is the single-handed promotion of the Russian Empire. The Russians led the Macedonians to move closer to Bulgaria in religion and diplomacy, and the attitude of the Russian Empire had a huge impact on all the people of the Balkans who believed in the Orthodox Church. After the alliance between Russia and Bulgaria, this influence became more obvious, and the Orthodox faith areas in the Balkans were all moving closer to Bulgaria. Taking advantage of this advantage, Ferdinand's government accelerated its penetration into the Balkans. The more difficult one is Romania. Watching the expansion of the Balkan countries, Kerala has nowhere to show, and can only watch the fun. To the west are Hungary and Serbia, Balkan is Russia's Ukraine and Moldova, to the south is Bulgaria, and to the east is the Black Sea. During the Bulgarian War, the Romanians were ready to come out and get a piece of the pie, but unfortunately they chose to support Serbia due to their relationship with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But Serbia was defeated too fast, and the war was over before Romania had time to mobilize the whole country. There is no way who could call his northern neighbor the Russian Empire, and the Russian Empire is precisely the ally of Bulgaria. Anyway, Romanians dare not gamble. More than 70% of the country's main troops were deployed on the front lines of Moldova and Ukraine. No matter how confident Kerala was in his ability to use troops, he did not think that a partial Romanian division could defeat Bulgaria. Coupled with the unstable situation in Romania at that time, a new round of peasant uprisings may break out at any time, and Kerala finally chose to abandon the Serbs. As for the domestic situation in the Ottomans, make up your mind. There are only 4 words: smoke everywhere. Chapter 165, Secret Talk. What? King George I of Greece is visiting secretly, Ferdinand said in disbelief. I'm too lazy to complain. Could it be that I've read too many novels for the mentally retarded? After all, he is also the king of a country. Who can be fooled by playing a secret visit? The Balkans are such a big place. Once you find that George I has not missed his face for a long time and is a little bit careful, you will know to check. As long as it is certain that George I appeared in Bulgaria, who is there to ask? Well, Ferdinand has not thought that the Ottoman Empire is so mentally retarded now, or that small countries like Greece and Bulgaria are not at all in the heart. They are busy dealing with the difficulties of the British. Before the outbreak of the First Balkan War in history, the 4 countries of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece made great preparations for the war, but none of them attracted the attention of the nobles, until the outbreak of the war was caught by surprise. In any case, King George I had already come, and Ferdinand had to go to receive him. Everyone was still relatives, so he still had to give him some face. Since George I was visiting in secret, Ferdinand also decided to cooperate with him in a play, and as long as the Greeks did not take the initiative to inform him, he pretended not to know about it. And the welcome ceremony with great fanfare can be saved, and even the meeting place cannot be selected at the Sofia Palace. The most important thing now is to figure out why George I secretly visited, and it came so suddenly. If it hadn't been noticed by the intelligence officers, It is estimated that he would not have been discovered until he arrived in Bulgaria. Foreign Minister: I remember that George I's secret envoy arrived in Sofia not long ago. Your foreign ministry is in charge of contacting him. How's the talk going? Ferdinand asked. The foreign minister said with a headache, Grand Duke, there is no result. The Greeks are asking too much, and they can pay too little. Ferdinand was taken aback for a moment, and asked casually, Oh, I want to hear how much appetite the Greeks have. What price are they going to pay? The foreign minister said with a smile, The Greeks want to join hands with us to deal with the Turks. Bulgaria will send 300,000 troops, Greece will send 150,000 troops, and the Greek navy will contain the Ottoman navy. There is no problem. But they demanded Thessaloniki, and they also wanted to share Macedonia, Albania, East Thrace with us. Ferdinand was a little speechless. In 1895, the Greek navy could not cut off the connection between Europe and Asia of the Ottoman Empire. The so-called containment was only used to fight in the Thessaloniki area. Since Greece wants the Thessaloniki region, it is reasonable to do it by itself. Why should it be included in the contribution of the alliance? If the Greek navy can suppress the Ottoman navy like in the Balkan Wars, that's about the same. The battles in Macedonia, Eastern Thrace, and Albania still depend on the decisive battle of the army. Bulgaria is the main force to obtain these areas. Even if the gap between the combat effectiveness of the two sides is not considered, Bulgaria will take the lead. It's no wonder that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not interested in joining forces with Greece. The conditions between the two sides are too far apart, and there is no possibility of a negotiation at all. In Ferdinand's view, Greece's 15th Army went to the battlefield, and they were just making up the numbers. Compared with Serbia, they were far inferior. Just look at the Greek-Turkish War in history. In 1897, an uprising occurred in Crete. In early February, the Greek army occupied Crete. In April, the Greek army attacked the Turkish army in Thessalia, and the Greek-Turkish War began. The Greek army was defeated at the end of April, and before the armistice on May 20th, the Turkish army was not far from Athens. On December 4th, a peace treaty was concluded, in which Greece paid Turkey 4 million lira in indemnity and ceded part of the territory of Thessaly to Turkey. Well, the Ottoman Empire didn't even have time to exert its strength, and the Greek army was beaten to the ground. With this combat power, it was the best of the Italian army. Ferdinand's bottom line is, Bulgaria can get most of Macedonia, Kosovo, East Thrace, and Istanbul. Greece can get part of Macedonia. Other areas, including Thessaloniki, Cyprus, and Thrace, can be owned by Greece. In fact, even with this distribution, Greece has already taken advantage of it. The Ottoman Empire in the Balkans has roughly 250,000 square kilometers of territory. Bosnia and Herzegovina is owned by Austria-Hungary. Remove the 50,060,000 square kilometers, Montenegro will acquire the Raška Generation area, nearly 15,000 square kilometers of territory. Greece will acquire part of Macedonia, Cyprus, Serbia, the Thessaloniki Generation, Crete, etc., with a territory of more than 40,000 square kilometers. However, the appetite of the Greeks exceeded his imagination, and he directly took away more than half of the spoils, nearly more than 100,000 square kilometers of territory. Can't, because Serbia is out, the Greek government will inherit their spoils. Isn't Ferdinand a scapegoat? However, George I, who is about to arrive in Bulgaria, does not think so. In his opinion, among the Balkan countries, Greece is the earliest independent country and the earliest time to form an army. Even if only 150,000 troops are sent, the combat effectiveness will not be higher than that of the 300,000 Bulgarian army. Weak. Then it is very reasonable to divide up the territory in this way. Greece has strong strength and great responsibility, so naturally it should take the biggest piece of the cake. Well, before the Greek-Turkish War, the Greeks had full confidence in the combat effectiveness of their army, otherwise they would not have singled out the Ottoman Empire. Time flies, and a week later, the disguised king of Greece, George I, Arrived in Sofia. Ferdinand held a cordial and friendly meeting with him in a royal manner on the outskirts of Sofia. The two sides reached an agreement on strengthening economic and commercial exchanges between the two countries. Simply put, Bulgaria and Greece have reached an agreement on the issue of the Ottoman Empire and decided to join forces to overthrow the evil rule of Sudan in the Balkans. As for the issue of loot, Ferdinand was not easy to say directly when he looked at the confident George I. The Greek army is a weak chicken and can only be used for soy sauce. Ferdinand can only make a very constructive proposal. George, it seems that our bottom line is too different, and we can't talk about it today. Why don't we just take a gamble? After defeating the Ottoman Empire, whoever grabs the territory of the Balkans first will go to whoever grabs it first, and at the same time grabs half of the family, and those who fall behind will consider themselves unlucky. After a moment of silence, George I seemed to be thinking about whether he would suffer. Ferdinand said provocatively, "How do you dare to take a gamble?" Chapter 166, New Balkan Alliance. After thinking about it, George I found that although there were more Bulgarian troops, the Istanbul area was close to Constantinople, and the Bulgarian army had to undertake the main force of this war. I am still confident in the combat effectiveness of the Greek army. If it wasn't for the concern that Bulgaria would become a fisherman, the Greek government would be ready to take on the Ottoman Empire one-on-one. Okay, Ferdinand, I made a bet on behalf of the Greek government. Write this into the treaty. Don't you regret it? George I said confidently. Ferdinand smiled slightly. And you will cry when the Greek army performs on the field. On August 12, 1895, Ferdinand and King George I of Greece signed the famous Balkan Treaty in the suburban estate of Sofia, marking the initial establishment of the Balkan Alliance. The treaty stipulates, 1. For the Ottoman Empire, the two countries undertake mutual defense tasks. Once any country between the two countries has a war with the Ottoman Empire, the other country must also declare war on the Ottoman Empire unconditionally. 2. Within 3 months before the outbreak of the war, the other party must be notified to prepare in advance, otherwise the other party can join the war 1 week after the outbreak of the war! 3. The time for the outbreak of the war must be 5 years later, otherwise Bulgaria will have the right to delay its participation in the war for 1 month. This was proposed by Ferdinand, on the grounds that Bulgaria had just finished playing Serbia and needed to recuperate. 4. Regarding the issue of loot, in principle, individual operations are first come, first served. In joint operations, the number of enemies killed by each side is divided by the total number of enemies killed, and the distribution is based on their respective proportions. In addition to the secret treaty, the two countries also signed a treaty of friendly business and trade exchanges. Of course, the contract was no longer signed by Ferdinand and George I. The ordinary treaty was naturally handled by the foreign ministries of both sides. The contents include, 1. The two countries give each other the most favored nation treatment to facilitate direct business exchanges between the two countries. 2. The two countries should strengthen non-governmental cooperation and encourage cultural exchanges. After digging a deep pit for the Greeks, Ferdinand returned to the palace contented. Since the Greeks are not on the towel, then it is no wonder that his hands are black. However, Bulgaria's strategy is about to undergo a small change. The outlet to the Mediterranean does not necessarily require Albania. According to Macedonia, Thrace and Ypres may be a better choice! In fact, Ferdinand didn't care about the Balkan Alliance. The combat effectiveness of the Greek army at the end of the 19th century was really doubtful. Serbia has been abolished, and they will not appear in the Balkan Wars for at least 20 years. 20 years later, if it is not annexed by Austria-Hungary, it will be too late to come up with bubbles. Montenegro, is too small, even if it bursts liver and kidneys. At most 20,000 to 30,000 troops can be gathered, and it's okay to play soy sauce. The biggest purpose of establishing the alliance is to cheer up the Greeks and encourage them to challenge the Ottoman Empire. It would be perfect if we could borrow the hands of the Turks and abolish Greece like history. If George I knew Ferdinand's true thoughts, I don't know if he would be pissed off. Now he is returning to Athens with confidence. Since Ferdinand asked to put the war time in 5 years, the Greek government has not even started to prepare for the war, and of course there is no money to do it. Ferdinand didn't know yet that when he calculated Greece, someone also marked his doctrine. After the Second Bulgarian War, Bulgaria has come into the eyes of people with a heart, and this foreign loan has become a game of foreign powers. Since Bulgaria's loan program was proposed, it has attracted the attention of the foreign powers. Foreign Minister Medvedev, Chancellor of the Exchequer Kennedy, and Prime Minister Constantine have all become the focus of the public relations of various consortiums. Of course, this is not a good thing, because now that Germany, Austria, France and Russia have joined together to form a consortium, the British Empire will naturally go it alone. In addition, bank consortia from the United States, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, Belgium and other countries also participated. Bulgaria will face another diplomatic choice. Aside from other things, Bulgaria must make a choice between Germany and Austria and France and Russia. The advantage of choosing DAO is that there is no need to repay the long-term loan. Anyway, when the World War broke out, DAO would not have the ability to collect the debt. After the war, maybe Bulgaria can pay off the debt with 100 levs. However, in the following Balkan expansion, Bulgaria will be embarrassed. Will Germany give up the Ottoman Empire for Bulgaria? Anyway, Ferdinand wouldn't believe it. The key is the retaliation of the Russian Empire, which Bulgaria cannot afford. Ferdinand doesn't think that his political skills are so defiant that he can have both sides. Even if they knew that the conditions given by DAO were more favorable, Bulgaria had no choice. Ferdinand knew about this problem, as did others. It is estimated that DAO himself did not hold much hope, and it is more likely to block the Russians. The British are worthy of being a shit-stirrer, and the ability to fool people is not covered. In addition to the loan, Bulgaria was proposed to build a navy, and Bulgaria was invited to participate in the scramble for African colonies. Even Ferdinand was secretly conscious of the dizziness of the cabinet flickering. You must know that at the end of the 19th century, it was the peak period for foreign powers to divide up Africa. After this village, there is no such shop. If there is the support of the British, Bulgaria will concentrate all its efforts and smash the fleet out, and it will not be able to get a share of the pie in Africa. Ferdinand still ruthlessly refused. The navy was not established in a day, and when the Bulgarian fleet formed a fighting force, it is estimated that the daylily will be cold. A big picture cake, you can't see it and you can't eat it. I don't know if the Greeks were fooled by the British like this, and they desperately smashed the fleet. In the end, the colonies were not caught, but they played deadly with the Ottoman navy. Do you think the British will give up after refusing? Next, the British Empire invited Bulgaria to join the intervention army to interfere in the Armenian issue. Oh, and the Greeks have joined. This time the temptation is much greater. The three countries have joined forces to overthrow the Turks. In theory, there is no problem at all. At that time, the Balkans will be divided up by Bulgaria and Greece. Ferdinand knew that it was actually a huge crater. The navy may be able to easily deal with the Turks and the British Empire, but the army Bulgaria is ready to go head-to-head with the Turks. It wasn't that Ferdinand looked down on the British army. If it weren't for the training in the Boer War, the First World War would have given the British army no room to play. Ferdinand had to use his personal prestige to forcibly suppress the turmoil in the hearts of the people at home, and he also deeply realized the influence of the British Empire. Chapter 167, Russia and Bulgaria Relations. There is no free lunch in the world. After the alliance between Bulgaria and Russia, Bulgaria's comprehensive national strength has achieved considerable development, which has at least tripled compared to the same period in history. Now it has to be controlled by others. Once there is no such alliance, Bulgaria's national strength will be abolished by at least 3 layers. Since he was about to be slaughtered, Ferdinand also decided that the lion would open his mouth. Anyway, no matter how much he paid, he could get it back from the Ottoman Empire. Aren't the French rich and rich? Well, let's borrow a little more. It's no problem to have a mortgage. Whether it's the right of way or the tax can be negotiated. 1 billion francs, as long as you are willing to lend, Ferdinand said, even if you want the royal palace of Sofia as a mortgage. What, you want to build the railway? Yes. Do you see what other roads can be built in Bulgaria now? Go and fix it. Anyway, the main roads are almost repaired, and it is none of our business to lose money on other routes. What, want a tax mortgage? Sure. Now Bulgaria's most important trading partner, the Russian Empire, is basically equal to zero tariffs. As for trade with other countries, the biggest item is the export of agricultural products, which is directly tariff-free. The largest imported goods are mechanical products. Anything in urgent need in Bulgaria is also duty-free. In fact, the proportion of Bulgaria's customs revenue in the fiscal is already very low. That's 7 or 8 million levs a year. Whatever you do, the Bulgarian market is so big. A typical dead pig is not afraid of boiling water. This is the current state of Ferdinand. Anyway, Bulgaria's plate is so big now, and it is attached to the Russian Empire in international politics. If the French have too much appetite, it will inevitably affect the interests of the Russians. It is obvious that this time the French-Russian joint group is formed, the Russian banking consortium has limited strength, and the French talents are the gold masters. The obvious purpose is to use the loan to control the Bulgarian economy. France and Russia are likely to reach an agreement. The Russians will further expand their influence in Bulgaria, and the French will gain economic benefits. In this regard, Ferdinand is under no pressure at all. Now the major industries in Bulgaria are already under their own control, and the railways are completely owned by the government. Any foreign capital involved must abide by his rules, otherwise you can feel what it means to be unable to move. Unless the French make a French concession, but this possibility is infinitely zero, the Russians will be the first to refuse. After the alliance between Bulgaria and Russia, the industrial and commercial circles of the two countries were the first to move closer together, and the tariffs fell again and again. If France established a concession, wouldn't it give French goods an opportunity to enter the Russian Empire and evade tariffs? Unlike Bulgaria's small arms and CAFs, France at the end of the 19th century was an industrial powerhouse. If there was no tariff protection, it is estimated that the nascent national bourgeoisie in Russia would not be able to withstand the impact! Nicholas II, who was far away in St. Petersburg, also had a headache for Bulgaria's loan request. It's actually quite funny to say that, apart from direct economic benefits, the Russian government doesn't know what to expect. Talk about tariffs, I'm sorry, but the little tariffs between Bulgaria and Russia are still tariffs. Even the salaries of the customs staff are not enough. If it weren't for the purpose of checking illegal businessmen using this channel to smuggle goods from other countries, the customs would be too lazy to check. In charge of the tariffs of other countries, it is to facilitate the export of its own goods, but it is completely unnecessary for Bulgaria. As for opening a factory, well, Bulgaria welcomes Russian businessmen to invest in the past. As long as you have money, you can invest in arsenals. As long as you can sell it, of course the Bulgarian military will not buy it. Mineral resources, Nicholas II expressed disdain. Is Bulgaria still the largest importer of Russian minerals? As for other religious and cultural exports, is this a condition? Now the folk cultural exchanges between the two countries, is it less? On the streets of Russia, Bulgarian novels are still being sung. On the streets of Bulgaria, the poetry of the Russian Empire is also indispensable. The languages of the two countries are similar. The characters are similar, and even the religious customs are similar. There is no problem in the communication between the two sides, not even translation is needed. There is no need for the government to intervene. Can't blame Bulgaria for being too cooperative. Russia is exporting culture to Bulgaria, and Bulgaria is also exporting culture to the Russian Empire. Is the birthplace of ancient Russians still in Sofia? Sometimes the younger brother is too cooperative, which is also a problem. At least now, the Russian Empire has to consider the feelings of Bulgaria, and cannot make excessive conditions and destroy the friendly relations between the two countries. Prime Minister, what additional demands do you think we can make now? Nicholas II asked depressedly. The Prime Minister smiled and said, Your Majesty, It seems that we don't need to mention any conditions now. As long as we continue to maintain friendly exchanges between the two countries, perhaps in 30 or 50 years' time, there will be a highly autonomous Bulgarian Grand Duchy under the Russian Empire. The crowd burst into laughter. That's right, in theory, the economies of the two countries are tied together. It is cultural export and immigration. After 30 to 50 years, a new generation has grown up. It is natural for the two sides to unite as one. Since it is part of the Russian Empire sooner or later, it doesn't matter if you take advantage of the time for the Bulgarians, which also serves as a benchmark for the unification of the entire Slavic nation. At this time, the Minister of the Navy suddenly said, "Your Majesty, we can actually strengthen the military ties between the two countries, and even support the Bulgarians to control the Black Sea Strait when the time is right." Nicholas II knew in his heart that the Navy had always been fond of the Black Sea Strait, but after the strategic focus of the Russian Empire moved eastward, he no longer had the energy to compete for the Black Sea Strait. After all, the European powers, with the exception of France, probably did not welcome the Russian Navy into the Mediterranean. Don't listen to what the British say, carve up the Ottomans, and the Russian Empire will gain the coast of the Black Sea Strait. Once the Russian Navy really rushes out of the Black Sea and enters the Mediterranean Sea, it will be another situation. Whether it is the British, Italians, Spaniards, or Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they will all become obstacles to the Russian Empire. Although the Mediterranean Sea is large, it cannot accommodate so many forces. Before Nicholas II did not carve up the Ottomans with the British, he just knew that he would face too many enemies when he entered the Mediterranean. Once you're in it, it's hard to jump out. If it doesn't work, the British will be besieged and beaten up again, and it will be a small matter to be beaten back. Let the British or any other powers control any part of the strait, and the life of the Russian Empire will not be easy. The Turks could master the strait, and that was because the Ottoman Empire was weak and did not have the guts to cut off the major sea arteries of the Russian Empire. Try British one, a bad one, cut off the connection of the Russian Empire to the world in minutes. Chapter 168, The Strategy of the Russian Empire. Since you can't do it yourself, then supporting the puppet is also a good choice. The Ottoman Empire is indeed weak, but it can't stand the feud between Russia and Turkey. God knows, will the Sultan go crazy someday? Give it a shot? Isn't the Armenian question an example? You can do it. Why keep it a secret? The Russian Empire has done nothing less to suppress the rebellions of ethnic minorities. But when the news leaks, it has already been done. When have you ever been caught by the international community? In the eyes of Russians, this is completely worrying about IQ. Completely ignoring the disparity in national strength between the two sides. If the Armenian issue occurred in the Russian Empire, it is estimated that the people would be shouting twice, and most governments would pretend not to see it. The strategy of the Russian Empire has to start from the beginning, and it is all forced out. The predecessor of the Russian Empire was the Principality of Moscow, located in the middle of the Eastern European plain. Most of the territory has a high latitude, a cold climate and a harsh environment. Therefore, the focus of the Russian expansion is to the south and west, followed by east, and finally north. To the north is the Arctic Ocean. It is well known that the Arctic Ocean has an extremely cold climate and poor navigation conditions. The long coastline of the Arctic Ocean is only a place where Murmansk can be used as an outlet. It is the only non-frozen port in the Arctic Ocean. However, Murmansk is an estuary port with a high latitude and a cold climate. In August, the highest temperature in the daytime is -12 degrees, and the night is 0 degrees. In winter, the minimum temperature at night once reached -60 degrees. To develop a port on this icy wasteland, the difficulty can be imagined. The road to the north was blocked, and to the west, the Russians and their western neighbors fought for hundreds of years. Part of the coastline of the east coast of the Baltic Sea has been seized from countries such as Finland, Sweden, Lithuania and Poland, but the Baltic Sea is a closed inland sea. The Russian Navy was limited to the eastern Baltic Sea, and wanted to go out unless they annexed the coastal countries such as Sweden, Germany, and Denmark. But no matter how big or small the coastal countries are, they are all small strongmen who can't be beaten to death, and none of them are easy to mess with. First, Denmark's Kalmar dominated, and then Guerra's Sweden was awesome again. Now it's Germany's turn to rise again. Anyway, the Russian Empire can't settle it. Let's go south. Unfortunately, the Black Sea is more closed than the Baltic Sea. If you want to go out, you have to go through Turkey, and you have to go through the Mediterranean Sea to get out of Turkey. The Russians had tried to snatch the Bosphorus from Turkey, only to be beaten back by the Anglo-French partnership in the Crimean War. The current situation is obvious. Even if the Russian Empire can park out Turkey, it has to be beaten back into the Mediterranean Sea. Therefore, the Russian Empire has put its strategic focus on the Far East. In contrast, Europe is a hard bone, and the Far East is a soft persimmon. The Russians have seized large tracts of land from the Fudi Empire and gained the natural port of Vladivostok. However, although Vladivostok is in good conditions, it has a freezing period, and is surrounded by the Japanese archipelago, the Korean peninsula, and the Aleutian Islands. If the Russians want to go out of the Pacific Ocean, they have to go through it. However, if you compare it, you will find that compared with the UK and Germany in Europe, the little troubles of Japan and North Korea are simply insignificant. The Russian Empire has no plans to borrow the way. Since it has taken a fancy to it, it will be good to grab it soon. Anyway, Japan and North Korea at the end of the 19th century were weak chickens, and they were not in the eyes of the Russians. Now that Russia has found the best breakthrough, naturally it will not stay in Europe and continue to fight the copy of hell. The Navy wants to open the way to the Mediterranean in advance, but it is a precautionary measure. It is good to succeed, but it is okay to fail. There is also a reason that cannot be said, just to brush the sense of existence. To support the Bulgarians coming out to grab the strait, there must be a navy, right? Just like Bulgaria's pocket-sized navy, it's okay to catch smugglers in the offshore waters. If they set sail, maybe they will be directly destroyed by pirates? The value of the Russian navy, doesn't it show up? According to traditional practice, the Bulgarian navy is the Russian navy wearing a vest. From establishment to training, it should be done by the Russian navy, including command power. As for Bulgaria's attitude, does this matter? Can you not eat the pie delivered to your door? Anyway, the future is part of the Russian Empire, just like several kingdoms in the German Empire. The present is for the future harvest. After all, before the opening of the Siberian Railway, the power that the Russian Empire can put into the Far East is extremely limited, and the navy will become a spectator. This is intolerable to the Admiralty. Whether it is out of personal interest or collective interest, the Admiralty must keep the navy alive at all times. Then the obedient Bulgaria entered the eyes of everyone. It just so happened that in the Second Bulgarian War, the Bulgarian army performed well and won the true heritage of the Russian Empire. Note: before 1886, the Bulgarian army was run by the Russians. From establishment to training, it was completed at the request of Russian instructors. Supporting Bulgaria to ban the Ottoman Empire's monopoly on the strait is a good choice. As for whether Bulgaria will become bigger, sorry, it doesn't exist, at least in front of the Russian Empire at its peak. Even if Ferdinand unified the Balkans, he had to be an honest little brother. At the end of the 19th century, in terms of comprehensive national strength, the British Empire was the worthy leader, followed by the Russian Empire, and Germany and the United States were still practicing their internal skills. This ranking remained unchanged until 1905. The Franco-Russian alliance suppressed the German, Austrian-Italian tripartite alliance in Europe. In order to reduce the pressure on the European continent, all countries, except France, unanimously chose to lead the way. Austro-Hungary must pretend to be a grandson and rely on Germany to barely compete with the Russian Empire, not to mention Bulgaria. After waiting for decades, Bulgaria has risen, and the two countries have long been tied together, and it is no longer a matter of personal understanding. The Navy Minister's argument: as early as more than 10 years ago, the Russian Empire already had a similar plan, but for various reasons, It has not been implemented. From the time of Bulgarian independence, the Russian Empire had a strong influence and even mastered the Bulgarian army for a time, until 1885, that changed. Now I put it up again. The difference from the past is that Bulgaria's strength is slightly stronger. In order to avoid causing dissatisfaction with the Bulgarians, Alexander III began to use wire methods. It seems that the effect is not bad at present. The big Bulgarian people implemented by Bulgaria is essentially the same as the strategy of unification of the Slavic peoples proposed by the Russian Empire. The only difference is that the appetite is smaller. Chapter 169. Russian Thoughts. Support Bulgaria and the Turks to compete for the Bosphorus Strait and the Sea of Marmara. It is not big enough to change the strategic focus of the Russian Empire. It is not too small. It means a new round of Balkan wars about to explode. In the first Balkan War in history, the Russian Empire supported the Pan-Serbian Union and ended the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the Balkans. One of the purposes was for the Bosphorus Strait. But unfortunately, due to the intrigue of the Balkan alliance, this strategy has not been realized. Bulgaria's status in the hearts of Russians has been greatly reduced. After all, the Bulgarian army was only more than 20 kilometers away from Constantinople at that time. No matter what reasons the Bulgarians have, but they did not take Constantinople and complete the strategy of the Russian Empire. The pot is doomed. In the eyes of the Russians, this is a sign that the Bulgarians only want to take advantage and do not want to take responsibility. There is also a hidden factor that the Bulgarian government wants to suppress the influence of the Russian Empire at home. Exposed. Moreover, the position of the Bulgarian government at that time fluctuated between the Allies and the Allies, which made the Russian Empire even more dissatisfied. Of course, Ferdinand's title of Tsar made Nicholas too embarrassed. He once declared, "One Tsar in the world is enough." So many factors add up, and under the combined effect, the Russians abandoned Bulgaria and chose to support Serbia. Everything is different now. The crippled Serbia is now the meat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Even if the Russian Empire wants to support them, there is nothing they can do. To put it simply, without the nod of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it would be difficult for the Russians to enter Serbia. So what else is there to say? After a brief silence, the Minister of Finance questioned, "Can the Bulgarians complete this plan?" Don't forget, no matter how weak the Ottoman Empire is, it is a big country with a population of more than 30 million. How can it be compared to a small Bulgaria? The opposition of the Chancellor of the Exchequer is not surprising. Well, basically it costs a fortune, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer doesn't like it. The Foreign Minister opened his mouth and explained, "I can answer this question. In a purely comprehensive comparison of strength, the Ottoman Empire is indeed far superior to Bulgaria. But now the Turks are not having a good time. There are many revolutions in the country, and the British are trying to attack Egypt and the Euphrates. The French and Italians are in Libya and Morocco in Africa. Of course, their main force is still staring at us. They are very strong, and they can only use 3 or 4 points in the Balkans. This is still based on the premise that they are very heavy on the capital Constantinople and prepare in advance. If the Turks are smart, the Armenian issue should be resolved immediately, regardless of international public opinion. Except for the British, the powers now do not intend to attack them. It just so happens that the British have been dragged down again, and the Italians have been trapped in the quagmire of Ethiopia. It will be much easier to resolve domestic conflicts as quickly as possible, and then meet challenges from them. Of course, even so, in the Balkans, the Ottoman Empire could theoretically amass 400,000 troops. It's still challenging for Bulgaria, and without our support, both sides would probably lose both. Nicholas II's eyes lit up, and he asked incredulously, "Really? Bulgaria now has the strength to defeat the Ottoman Empire and suffer serious losses?" The Minister of War boasted with a smile, "Your Majesty, the Bulgarian army was trained by us. How is the combat effectiveness? Our Ministry of War knows the best, even if there is still some gap between us, but it is still stronger than the Turks. A lot." The explanation of the Minister of the Army, everyone takes it for granted. The current Russian Empire is so awesome, Otherwise, how can we suppress the German-Austrian alliance at the same time, still have the confidence to challenge the hegemony of the British Empire? The words of the Minister of War gave Nicholas II enough confidence. He is young and vigorous, and now he needs to make achievements and prove his ability to the world. It is nothing more than civilization and martial arts, diplomatic maneuvering. There is no need to consider cultural governance. This is a long-term project. It is not too late to look at it again in 10 or 8 years. What about martial arts? Now that the Russian Empire is in full swing, the Siberian Railway has not opened to traffic, and Europe is crowded with foreign powers, it is difficult to achieve a breakthrough unless you go to the ocean. In fact, the expansion of the Russian Empire on the mainland has reached its limit. Diplomatically, during the period of Alexander III, the France-Russian alliance and the Russian-Pole alliance were established. International diplomacy? I'm sorry, now the German-Austrian alliance is unbreakable. The British-Russian conflict cannot be resolved, and there is no room for him to exert himself. The Far East strategy is now the most important part of Nicholas II, but the Far East transportation has restricted the eastward expansion of the Russian Empire. Historically, in order to concentrate on expanding eastward, the Russian Empire made concessions to Austro-Hungary on the Balkan issue in 1897, and the situation in the Balkans was stable for 10 years. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire is not much better. It has been busy cleaning up the domestic mess in 10 years. For the small Balkan countries, this is the golden decade, but unfortunately everyone has not grasped it. Greece and Ottoman came to a friendship park, and the vitality was licking the wound. Bulgaria is busy with political struggles at home. In Serbia, King Alexander I is busy revising the constitution, plus shame, taking a palace made 10 years older as the queen. Well, compared to him, Emperor Apocalypse is weak and violent. The people are busy making rebellion against the king, such as Alexander I was assassinated in 1903. After Russia's strategic center of gravity shifted eastward, first the big food empire fell with blood mold, and then it was the turn of the Japanese. There is no doubt that Nicholas II's attitude towards the Japanese can be described as bad. The scar on his forehead is the shame of his life. In history, after the Sino-Japanese War, the Three Kingdoms intervention to return Liao happened in this context. Omit a few. The proposal of the Admiralty is still very suitable for Nicholas II. For the sake of the Bosphorus Strait, his ancestors did a lot of work with the Turks. Now if you can easily start, that would be great. He smiled and said, since the Bulgarians have that strength, how can we not push it? Let Ferdinand master the Bosphorus for us first. If possible, including Ma Aegean, we can all support them. The Prime Minister laughed and said, Your Majesty, the Bulgarian army still has some combat power. The navy, do they have this type of arms? How can I remember that it is just an anti-smuggling brigade? It's not a joke to rely on them to control the strait. The crowd burst into laughter. Yes, can the Bulgarian navy be considered a navy? All the tonnages added up are not comparable to a battleship. The Russians have enough confidence to despise the world's weakest navy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Panslavism. The Minister of the Navy defended, I think their navy is just right now. The influence of the Russian Empire in Bulgaria is increasing day by day, but its influence on their army is extremely limited. Now that the Bulgarian army is self-contained, we can't penetrate it at all, so mastering their navy is crucial. The Prime Minister asked suspiciously, You mean, we have complete control over the Bulgarian navy? But is this necessary? You know that the navy can't be built in a short time. Does it take so much effort? The Admiralty said firmly, No, Mr. Prime Minister, you misunderstood what I mean. We have no intention of training a navy for Bulgaria, and even if we give him a navy, they can't afford it. As long as necessary, just to have a navy with the Bulgarian flag to show up, The capture of the Bosphorus and even the Aegean Sea still needs to be done by ourselves. Everyone understood, and after all, it was the navy who wanted to master the sea route to the Mediterranean, and Bulgaria was just a target on the bright side, so as not to stimulate the allergic nerves of the British. Nicholas too was tempted. Even if the strategic goal is the Far East now, it is not bad to master the main road to the Mediterranean. In the future, the strategic focus of the Russian Empire will still return to Europe. The foreign minister, who advocated Europe first, then Asia, took the opportunity and said, "Your Majesty, the British are now busy with the war with the Boers, and the whole of Europe is stumbling them." The Home Secretary objected, "No, it's okay to support the Bulgarians, but we can end it ourselves, which is likely to trigger a new round of war in Europe. The British are not fools, it is impossible to deceive them. Moreover, the Three Kingdoms alliance will not watch our actions." In the end, Nicholas II rejected the proposal to start the Bosphorus Strait now. After all, the Turks cannot become strong in a short time, and the weakened Ottoman Empire has no courage to confront Russia. However, the proposal to support Bulgaria passed. Weakening the Ottoman Empire has been a long-term national policy of the Russian Empire. The Ottoman Empire, with a territory of millions of square kilometers and a population of more than 30 million, was terrifyingly suppressing the existence of Europe at its peak. Now it has declined. How could Nicholas II not beat the underdogs? As for whether Bulgaria will become bigger, this is not within his scope of consideration. Anyway, now Bulgaria has been tied to a Russian chariot and can't get down. Backlash does not exist. Politics, economy and culture are already connected to each other. The Russian Empire will feel pain when it leaves Bulgaria, and Bulgaria will have to consider the issue of survival when it leaves Russia. Chancellor of the Exchequer, so what can we gain from it now? Who can tell what will happen in the future? If we help the Bulgarians for no reason, we are now at a loss. Talking about the interests, the Prime Minister said coldly, but now we are allies, and the good civil relations between Russia and Russia are hard-won, which is very important to the future strategy of the empire. When we raise conditions, we must take into account the sentiments of the people. Many requirements cannot be raised at all. In addition, although we are still two countries, we have come together economically. The Prime Minister's words were unanimously approved by everyone. This was related to a trend of thought at the time, pan-Slavism. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Slavs living in Austria, Hungary and the Balkans, under the influence of the development of capitalist production relations and the French bourgeois revolution, raised the liberation movement of the Slavic nation, and pan-Slavism was born. Slavic intellectuals first advocated the study of the history, folk songs and folk tales of the Slavic peoples to enhance cultural ties and achieve political unity, work together to deal with alien domination and change the bullied and oppressed position of the Slavs. In June 1848, the Slavists held a congress in Prague and demanded that all Slavs commit themselves to solidarity and cooperation to achieve equality of all nations. Due to the divergence of views among the representatives of various countries, no consensus could be reached. Similarly, Slavic factions appeared in Russia. They praised the Tsar and the social system of Tsarist Russia, many of whom established correspondence or exchange of visits with the pan-Slavists in Austria and the Balkans. In the middle of the 19th century, the crisis of serfdom in Russia deepened, and capitalist relations gradually developed. The Tsarist government was eager to expand abroad to ease domestic class contradictions. The Russian pan-Slavists took advantage of the early pan-Slavist ideas that emerged in Austria and tampered with them to serve the Tsar. Their basic claim is: 1. Declare that the Slavs and the Russians have a common history and blood relationship, that the language and culture are similar, that the religious beliefs are the same, that they live adjacent to each other, and that they have a common destiny and interests, and that the Russian nation is the leader of the Slavs. 2. Propaganda that Russia is the protector of the Slavic peoples, and that the future of the Slavs can only be guaranteed by the Tsar. 3. The establishment of the Great Slavic Empire with Russia as the allied leader can free the Slavs from the domination of Austria and the Ottoman Empire, and finally achieve the goal of advancing Russia's European borders to the west and south. These propositions conformed to the interests and needs of the Russian rulers, and became ideological weapons for the foreign aggression and expansion of the Tsarist Russian government. Therefore, from Alexander I to Nicholas II, support for pan-Slavism and its movement became the basic national policy of the Russian Empire! Due to Ferdinand's butterfly effect, the relations between Bulgaria and Russia are now showing a good development trend. People-to-people exchanges are increasing day by day, and pan-Slavism has begun to grow, especially among the younger generation. This situation happens to be exactly what the Tsarist government needs. Everyone present knows that if it continues, after another 20 to 30 years, no one will be able to stop the establishment of the two countries, the Great Slavic Empire with the Russian Empire as the core. Against this background, any attempt to undermine the relationship between the two countries is not something that Nicholas II can tolerate. This is also the reason why the Admiralty will support Bulgaria's expansion into the Ottoman Empire, and it will be his own sooner or later. As for whether Bulgaria will become bigger, no one in the Russian government would be worried. The size gap is too big. One is a big empire with a territory of more than 20 million square kilometers and a population of more than 150 million, compared with a small country with a population of only 4 million and a territory of less than 100,000. The gap is really huge. Even if Bulgaria grows 2 or 3 times, so what? Can it change the balance of power between the two? Chapter 171, The Turks Who Are Destined to Lose. In order to ensure the safety of the Black Sea Strait and to establish the Great Slavic Empire, the Russians finally decided to support Bulgaria to challenge the Ottoman Empire. But now the biggest problem is not the Russian government, but the attitude of the French government, who called the Russian Empire financially bad. 1 billion levis is not a small number. It is equivalent to nearly 40 million pounds in pounds, and it is also hundreds of tons in gold. It is not that the Russian Empire does not have this money, but it is absolutely impossible to have so many idle funds, which can be used as loans. Are they still borrowing money from the French themselves? Of course, compared to the Russian loan, Ferdinand's Lion's opening of 1 billion levis is actually nothing. During the Russo-Japanese War, the Russians once borrowed 800 million francs, and this was only a small amount of it. Of course, the French are willing to lend to the Russians. In addition to their economic interests, the most important thing is that they need the Russian Empire, an ally, to jointly suppress the Triple Alliance on the European continent. Bulgaria obviously does not have such strength, and the risk of lending to small countries is still very high. For example, the previous loan from the French to Serbia has basically been declared a waste. In Serbia, which was beaten by Ferdinand, the government has long since gone bankrupt. Now there is chaos in the country, and the situation depends on the Austro-Hungarian Empire to maintain the situation. There is no debt repayment. With the relationship between Germany and France, it is impossible for Austria-Hungary to let Serbia pay back the money. What about the Serbian government itself? It has long been overridden, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire is not a philanthropist. Even to help stabilize the situation, expenses will be reduced as much as possible. For example, the Serbian army was disbanded. No, it can't be said to be disbanded. After the end of the Serbian War, the main army of Serbia disappeared, and Austria-Hungary just put their mobilized militia back home. Then the last armed forces in Serbia, only Alexander I's guards were left with more than 3,000 people. There is also a group of policemen, and the Austro-Hungarian army has assumed the defense mission of Serbia. It seems that it will be annexed sooner or later. The simple loan amount is not large, and the French people are rich and wealthy. The capitalists whose interests have suffered losses are very dissatisfied. Now that Bulgaria has applied for a loan, they have already begun to grind their hands and prepare to make up for the loss. But the attitude of the international loan government is very important. No need for Ferdinand to do anything. Driven by interests, the capitalists have already started public relations, want to use the influence of the French government to grab the best benefits for them. President François Philippe IV is discussing with his staff. That's right, the sixth president of France, who famously said Dudin spends his time in a flower, and is a ghost too. Note, during sex with his mistress, he died of a heart attack. Don't get me wrong, although they are discussing about Bulgaria, the core is not about Bulgaria's loan issue, but their relationship with Russia. The Minister of Foreign Affairs analyzed, Mr. President, from our point of view, the eastward shift of the strategic center of the Russian Empire will definitely lead to a strategic contraction in Europe. In the future, the pressure on France on the Western Front will definitely increase. Our best option is to bring the Russians back to Europe, but that's hard to do, unless their Far East strategy is frustrated. Unfortunately, the Tatars in the east have fallen and are powerless to stop their expansion. However, the greedy Russians still did not give up their plan to give up the Balkans, and instead started the idea of supporting puppets. So far, it has been very successful. The Bulgarians are doing well so far, but the future is difficult to say. The young Archduke Ferdinand is not so easy to control. Nicholas II now wants to further control Bulgaria economically, but the Russians themselves are short of money, which is why the Russians asked us to jointly set up a bank. President François Philippe IV thought about it, said, "I see what you mean, the Russians are still not giving up on the Balkans, or are they still interested in the Bosphorus, right?" The Foreign Secretary replied, "Yes, Your Excellency." The greed of the Russians knows no bounds, and their appetite is much greater than we imagined. However, Nicholas II seems to have learned the lesson of his great-grandfather, knowing that no one in Europe wants them to enter the Mediterranean. So he adopted a roundabout strategy, first using Bulgaria as a pawn to test the attitude of the powers. Of course, it is not ruled out that it is to build the legendary Great Slavic Empire, and work hard, or even have both. If we agree to this loan, perhaps a new round of Balkan wars will break out in the near future. The Bulgarians cannot resist the bait thrown by the Russians. Whether it is Istanbul or the Macedonia region, Bulgaria is determined to win. Once the Balkan War breaks out, the Russians will have to take back some of their energy back to Europe, whether they want to or not. And as far as I can tell, if the Russians didn't do it themselves, but just supported Bulgaria's expansion into the Balkans, it's very possible. Provided that the Russians did not enter the Mediterranean. South Africa, now the British and the Germans, are still arguing over the Boers. In North Africa, the British and us are also in conflict, and they have no energy to interfere with the Russians' actions in the short term. In order to make the Turks admit the fact that the British occupied Egypt, it is estimated that the British are still eager to break out the Balkan War immediately. François Philippe IV asked in surprise, "So, the situation in the Balkans is now in our hands?" "That's right." The Foreign Secretary replied affirmatively. François Philippe IV loosened his shoulders and said, "We don't seem to have a reason to refuse. The Russians' actions in the Balkans will sooner or later conflict with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In this case, it's better to fulfill them!" It's best to pull Russia's strategic center of gravity back from the Far East. Even if it fails, it doesn't matter. Anyway, our capitalists can still make a lot of money. The Chancellor of the Exchequer interrupted, "Only if the Bulgarians win the war. If they lose, they won't be much better than Serbia. Then who will we get the loan from?" The Foreign Secretary smiled and said, "Oh, I can answer that question. Success or failure depends on the Russians' input. The Ottoman Empire has fallen, and now it just maintains an empty shelf, and it will be broken with a poke. Apart from us and the Russians, the British, the Italians, and the Austro-Hungarians all want them to lose this war, except the Germans. So whether the Bulgarians will win, we don't know yet, but the attitude of the powers is the same. The Germans can only be neutral at most. Anyway, the Turks are already destined to lose. Chapter 172, The French Attitude. Everyone's faces changed slightly. If there is another power besides Germany that has the best relationship with the Ottomans, it is France. Without it, interest. In 1895, France's investment in the Ottoman Empire was second only to Russia, with a total investment of more than 2.5 billion francs. accounting for about 10% of France's total foreign investment. In addition, France also holds 60% of the government bonds of the Ottoman Empire. Together, the total amount of funds that France has invested in the Ottoman Empire has exceeded 3 billion francs. For the sake of interests, the French government most wants the Ottoman Empire to maintain the status quo. After all, when the war broke out, the interests of the French in the Ottomans would certainly be affected. It is a pity that apart from France, Germany may secretly support the Turks to win over the Turks. Other powers are the enemies of the Sudanese government. Could France join forces for the Turks and the Germans? Of course it is impossible. Unless the French government is crazy, it will choose to stand with the Germans. And it is impossible for the Germans to provide much substantial assistance to the Turks. The Austro-Hungarian Empire in the Triple Alliance fought endlessly with the Turks in the Balkans, and the Bosnia-Herzegovina issue was the focus of the conflict between the two countries. The Italians were also eyeing the Turks' Libya and Morocco. The Germans could not always win over the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary and Italy. The British, just by looking at the plan they proposed to divide the Ottomans, knew where they stood, especially at the juncture of the Anglo-Boers War. The British still had to worry about the Sudanese government, taking advantage of the fire to recover Egypt. Needless to say, the attitude of the Russians. If you look at the history of the Russian-Turkish War, you will find that small wars have continued. The average war is less than once every 19 years. In terms of time, a new round of the Russian-Turkish War should come again. The two sides have been fighting for more than 200 years. The hatred is deep like the sea. If you want to ease the relationship, dream. The Russians rejected the British plan to divide, mainly because they were worried that the British would be uneasy, such as destroying Russia's Far East strategy, or taking the opportunity to enter the Aegean Sea. There is no way who can call the Black Sea straight. Is it so closed? If any of the main roads are blocked, the sea line of communication leading to the Mediterranean Sea can be blocked. And even if Britain kept its promise, it would be of little use to the Russian Empire. The foreign powers will not allow the Russian Navy to establish a foothold in the Mediterranean Sea, and there will be many more enemies by then. With the current strength of the Russian Navy, it is impossible to challenge the maritime hegemony system established by the United Kingdom. Anyway, the risk is too great, the benefit is not enough. But on the issue of weakening the Ottoman Empire, Britain, Russia, Italy, and Austria have the same position. The Russians are worried that the Ottoman Empire will rise again and threaten itself again. It can be said that the current international situation is worse for the Ottoman Empire than the First Balkan War. If Bulgaria wants to challenge the Ottomans now, the foreign powers do not mind supporting it. This is different from the Greek-Turkish War in 1897. At that time, the foreign powers had reached a preliminary compromise. The Armenian issue had been diluted, and the contradictions between the Turks and other countries had been temporarily eased. At that time the attitude of the powers changed, hoping that the Balkans would remain stable and did not support the fighting of the Greeks. Even so, the attitudes of the great powers tended to favor the Greeks when negotiating. But now it's all different. Due to Ferdinand's butterfly effect, Bulgaria, which was originally on both sides, now embraces the Russians' thighs. Serbia has been abolished and may be annexed by Austria-Hungary at any time. The situation in the Balkans has changed, and the historical conflict between Russia and Austria-Hungary has become less intense. Historically, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had an advantage in the Balkans. The Russians feared that Austria-Hungary's expansion in the Balkans would threaten the security of the Black Sea Strait, and all opposed Austria-Hungary's annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In addition, Serbia and Montenegro also stood up to support the Russians and opposed the annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina by Austria-Hungary. The attitude of the Bulgarian government was wavering again. At this time, the Germans were busy fighting for South Africa with the British, and did not want to be involved in the disputes in the Balkans. Austria-Hungary, without the support of the Germans, was forced to make concessions. The Russians also did not intend to expand in the Balkans in order to implement their Far East strategy. In 1897, the two countries reached a compromise on the Balkans. Now everything is different. Although the Germans and the British have become more acute because of the Anglo-Boers War and have no energy to join in the disputes in the Balkans. However, due to Ferdinand's butterfly effect, the Russian Empire's operation in Serbia has not been successful, and the Second Bulgarian-Serbia War broke out. Serbia has been completely controlled by Austria-Hungary, and has no ability to come out and sing the opposite of the boss, and Bulgaria hugged again. The thighs of the Russians are blocked by Bulgaria, and the threat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire to the Black Sea Strait has not been reflected. The contradiction between the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire was far less acute than it was in the same period in history. Although the two sides have not yet reached an agreement on the division of the Balkans, there is no conflict of core interests between the two sides. Now the Russian strategic focus is in the Far East, and the expansion of the Balkans is mainly to support Bulgaria. At the same time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's Balkan partition plan and Ferdinand's Balkan strategy are basically the same in the short term. This, of course, cannot be concealed from shrewd politicians. In the Second Bulgarian War, the Austro-Hungarian Empire did nothing to watch the war, and ate the biggest cake, which is undoubtedly the best example. In the eyes of people with a heart, Bulgaria is likely to have reached an agreement with Austria-Hungary on the Balkan issue. President Francois Philippe IV recognized this, and he was sure that the Russians would support Bulgaria's actions. Putting Constantinople in the hands of the Turks is no better than having the peace of mind in your own hands. As for Bulgaria, forget it. In his eyes, the Bulgarian army is okay. The navy, what kind of creature is that? In any case, a Bulgaria without a navy had to turn to the Russians to control the Black Sea Strait. In essence, Constantinople was still in the hands of the Russians. It seems that the Turks are going to be unlucky again, but this has little to do with us, as long as we can protect our interests. Francois Philippe IV thought for a while and said, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said with a smile, if we don't plan to intervene, then the Bulgarian loan will be handed over to the capitalists to handle it themselves. I believe they will have a satisfactory harvest this time. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Not only the capitalists will have a satisfactory harvest, but everyone sitting will also have a satisfactory harvest. After all, international loans require the government to come forward, otherwise the capitalists will not be able to go to a country to collect debts. Chapter 173, Russian Ambition. Speculation is speculation. Ferdinand still has to personally determine the attitudes of France and Russia before he can rest assured. So he asked, Mr. Medvedev, what are the conditions of the Russians? Medvedev said nervously, the Russians hope that the navies of the two countries can share all military ports. It is no wonder that he is not nervous. Bulgaria's port in the Black Sea is completely dispensable for the Russian Imperial Navy. Now that this condition is put forward, there is only one possibility, that is, Bulgaria's strategy has been exposed. Only the estuary of the Mediterranean is worthy of the Russians' attention. As for the Navy-shared naval port, it was directly filtered out by everyone, but it was just a good thing to say on the surface. Could it be that the theoretical navy in Bulgaria can really go to use the Russian military port? After a while, Foreign Minister Medvedev added another sentence, saying, also, I hope our two countries can have more in-depth cultural exchanges. Ferdinand was shocked. It was okay to share the military port in front. Although the Russians already knew Bulgaria's strategic intentions, they also hinted at the intention to support Bulgaria's expansion. As for the Bosphorus, Ferdinand has not dared to think about it. To master the Bosphorus Strait, there is no way around a core problem, Constantinople. And there must also be a navy, so although Constantinople is good, it is still a tasteless rib for current Bulgaria. It's easy to get hold of, but hard to keep. The Turks will definitely not give up easily. There is no sea power, and Ferdinand does not want to be attacked by the Ottoman navy every day. As for the hope of further in-depth cultural exchanges in the future, the ambition is obvious. Are the cultural exchanges between Bulgaria and Russia not deep enough? It is obvious that the purpose is to spread pan-Slavism. Ferdinand sneered secretly, now that nationalism in Bulgaria has risen, and pan-Slavism wants to be recognized, it is impossible to achieve it in a short time. After 10 or 20 years, Bulgaria will not be the Bulgaria it is now. At that time, even if Ferdinand can promised to establish the great Slavic federal empire, can the European powers agree? And pan-Slavism is not entirely bad for Bulgaria. At least it can increase immigration from Russia and identify with Bulgaria. In the end, who can get the most benefit depends on the means. That being the case, Ferdinand decided to push it again, not to promote pan-Slavism. Well, I also went to the Russian Empire for propaganda. At present, Ferdinand has decided to send people to Ukraine to promote a wave of pan-Slavism for the Russian government. Of course, Russia can be removed. If the Russian Empire can resist a war against the sky, then there is nothing to say. Ferdinand can directly bow his head and admit defeat and become a kingdom and the federal empire. But what about history? Then no wonder he went to inherit part of the heritage of the Russian Empire. Anyway, everyone is a Slavic nation. Under the influence of pan-Slavism, I think everyone will not be so resistant to joining the big family of Bulgaria. It can be said that Ferdinand is making a big gamble, that if he wins, Bulgaria will step on the corpse of the Russian Empire to establish the Third Bulgarian Empire. For Bulgaria, everything is lost. For Ferdinand personally, the big deal is to become the king of the great Slavic federal empire. No matter how you look at it, it is a profit. It is nothing more than a question of how much profit. Ferdinand said fiercely, "Tell the Russians, we agreed to their conditions, but we must obtain the full support of the Russian Empire, whether in diplomacy or military technology. I hope to be able to expand in all directions." Cooperation. On this issue, Ferdinand did not ask the cabinet's opinion. He knew that if the cabinet decided, most of the time it won't work. Without foresight, who would not think that a Russian-Japanese war would break out in the Far East more than 10 years later? And then internal contradictions in Russia would intensify, a revolution would break out, and the Russian Empire would be pulled down from the altar. More than 20 years later, a world war will break out, directly causing the collapse of the Russian Empire! After a moment of silence, Prime Minister Konstantin hesitantly admonished, "Your Excellency, the Russians' wolf ambitions have been exposed. We have agreed to their conditions. I am afraid there will be big trouble in the future." Ferdinand said coldly, "It's not that simple. Even if it is the condition we rejected this time, the Russians will not give up. I don't know how many tricks will be used to force us to compromise. In this case, it is better to directly exchange some benefits. As long as our strategic goals are achieved, Bulgaria is a medium-sized country with a population of over 10 million. At that time, even if the Russians want to establish a great Slavic federal empire, we will have enough confidence to negotiate conditions. And the powers will not tolerate the annexation of the Balkans by the Russians. At least the Austro-Hungarian Empire will not agree. The British will not let Russia go to the Mediterranean and compete with them for supremacy. Everyone is now an angry expression. The Russians actually want to annex Bulgaria, which is completely intolerable. The Great Slavic Federation Empire sounds very good. If the Russian Empire is weaker, or Bulgaria is 10 times or 8 times stronger, it may really be possible. But don't think about it now. The gap between the two sides is too big. The so-called federation is not a word of the Russians. Seeing everyone's reaction, Ferdinand comforted, "You don't have to worry too much, we still have enough time. At least now there is a Romanian gap between us and the Russians. To build the great Slavic Empire is not that simple. Even if we cooperate wholeheartedly, the foreign powers will intervene. There is only one chance. If there is not enough grasp, Nicholas II will not shoot. Now the Russian strategic center of gravity is still the Far East. A lot of manpower and material resources have been invested in the Siberian Railway. It is impossible for Russia to withdraw in at least 10 years. After listening to Ferdinand's words, everyone's expressions softened a little. Even if pan-Slavism is strong, it is impossible to achieve results in a short period of time. Moreover, pan-Slavism and Ferdinand's Great Bulgarians have the same purpose, which will promote national integration in Bulgaria. Besides, before there is no border, no matter how confident Nicholas II is, he will not establish a federal empire in advance. Otherwise, They will be separated into two places, and if the foreign powers intervene, it will easily cause another split. The Russians' wishful thinking is about to start. Let's get Romania first. By the way, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire behind Romania have to be settled. To do this, win a world war first. Chapter 174, Big Loan. There is no doubt that after reaching a political agreement, the remaining details of negotiation and wrangling no longer need Ferdinand's intervention. Although the loan is mainly from France, it does not mean that the Bulgarian government does not need to borrow from other countries. The end of the 19th century was the golden age of capitalist development. Even if negotiations at the government level failed, as long as the capitalists thought it was profitable, the business would still be done. After the Bulgarian War, Bulgaria fully attracted the attention of the international community. Everyone suddenly discovered that in the Balkans, a small country has begun to rise. Politicians are concerned about the impact on the international situation, and capitalists are naturally concerned about interests. As long as you are interested, it is easy to find that the Bulgarian economy has grown rapidly in recent years. Rapid economic growth is naturally a golden period for capitalists to make money. It is a pity that this discovery is too late. The Bulgarian domestic market is limited and saturated, and there is no chance for latecomers to enter. However, this is only for small capitalists. For large consortiums, making money financially is much faster than the real economy. After evaluating the risks, you will find that the repayment ability of the Bulgarian government is still very strong. You must know that in order to stimulate economic development in Bulgaria, many industries are reducing or even exempting taxes. Once the tax returns to normal levels, the fiscal revenue will be greatly increased. Once there is a proper profit, the capitalists will be emboldened. If there is a 10% profit, it is guaranteed to be used everywhere. With a 20% profit, it will be active. With a 50% profit, it will be take the risk. With 100% profit, it dares to trample all human laws. With 300% profit, it dares to commit any crime. Marx das Kapital. For ordinary people, the profit from issuing loans and buying bonds may only be a few points. But for the consortium, if there are not many banks in their hands, they are too embarrassed to come out and mix. Using other people's money to make money is the most commonly used method for them. Essentially, apart from the risk, the cost of lending is surprisingly low, which is why capitalists are keen to engage in finance. Otherwise, if you simply use your own money to lend, how much interest can you get? In the face of high profits, capital has never been able to resist. Even if everything was not obtained diplomatically, the loan negotiations continued, albeit at a much lower amount. In the light of the fact that no matter how small a mosquito is, the Bulgarian government is still very enthusiastic about contacting representatives of all parties and working hard to obtain every loan. Time passed by in a hurry. By the end of 1895, through the unremitting efforts of the Bulgarian government, a total of 15 loans of varying amounts had been obtained, involving a total of 987 million leva. What is high debt? The Bulgarian government is now in high debt, paying more than 80 million levs every year just to pay the interest on the funds. If the previous loan interest is added, this figure has exceeded 100 million leva. The French alone have provided 800 million leva, equivalent to francs, at one time, and the other dozen or so loans are less than 200 million. It can only be said that international loans in this era are still dominated by the government. Small loans are okay, but the interest is a little higher. There are not many additional conditions, and most of them are issued at one time. However, the huge sums of money from the French, or the loans jointly issued by France and Russia, are not so easy to get. First, the loan is not issued in one lump sum, but divided into 3 grants, the first distribution of 300 million leva, the rest are distributed twice. Second, it is necessary to monitor the direction of use of the loan. According to the agreement, of the 300 million levs, Bulgaria must invest in the navy. As for how to use it, Ferdinand does not need to worry about it. The Russians will help formulate a reasonable naval development plan. The remaining 600 million levas, or francs, of which there must be half of the funds, which must be used to buy French goods. And the Bulgarian government must also ensure that no less than 100 million levs are invested in the military industry. Whether Ferdinand has tried his best to imagine the shamelessness of the powers, or underestimated the low morale of the powers. To monitor loan usage, don't complain. But even the specific usage conditions are clearly stipulated, and there is no need to say. If it weren't for the Navy development plan of 300 million levs, which were all 20-year interest-free loans, he would never have asked for it. That's right, France and Russia have already planned to support Bulgaria's acquisition of the Black Sea Strait. Of course, this is only a nominal acquisition, and the actual control is still in the hands of the Russians. What the French get is the right to travel freely without paying customs duties. The Russian Empire is the largest foreign investor in France and the largest overseas market for French goods, so the Turks' tariffs are very unsightly. It can be seen that the annual payment of tens of millions of francs to the Turks has greatly dissatisfied the French capitalists. They're ready to kick this stumbling block away whenever they get a chance. The senior officials of the Bulgarian government were furious when they got the final treaty. Isn't this Bulgaria fighting for the Russians, the French? Moreover, they are still the kind of mercenaries who bring their own dry food and do not need to pay army salaries. All harvests can only be robbed by themselves. Fortunately, the Bulgarian navy has no sense of existence, otherwise there is no possibility of passing. As soon as this treaty is signed, the Bulgarian navy will be reduced to a fleet in the hands of the Russian Empire. However, Ferdinand was tempted. He had to rely on Bulgaria's own strength to establish a navy, and he would not even think about forming a combat power without a 20 or 30 years. If you can use the power of the Russians, it may only take a few years to build a fleet. The Russians can send officers, but not all soldiers. No matter how bad it is, Bulgaria can also get a group of naval soldiers and a set of naval logistics system. Ferdinand said earnestly, "Okay, gentlemen, put away the anger in your hearts. Anger can only burn your reason, and calmness can solve the problem. It is now clear that our strategy has been exposed, at least the Russians have speculated. Either we agree to their terms and become a mercenary with the support of the Franco-Russian alliance, defeat the Turks and we will gain a large territory in the Balkans of the Ottoman Empire. Of course we have to pay a heavy economic price, and even our navy will become a fleet in the hands of the Russians. Either we reject the conditions of the Russians, and we part ways with the Russian Empire. Not only will we not be able to get support, but we will face a series of suppression from the Russians. Everyone is Bulgarian elite. Now everyone needs to make a choice for the fate of Bulgaria. Think calmly and tell me the answer." Chapter 175, Choice. Well, all the words have been said by Ferdinand, and everyone just needs to decide whether to do it or not. In fact, the Bulgarian government has no choice between the two paths in front of it. There is no free lunch in the world. How is it possible to get benefits without paying a price? The Russians have fought with the Turks for more than 200 years for the Bosphorus Strait, and now they will support Bulgaria to win Constantinople in vain. Don't dream. The strategy formulated by Ferdinand never hit Constantinople's idea from beginning to end. There is no way who calls the Bosphorus Strait the lifeline for the Russians to enter the Mediterranean Sea? Once you have mastered Constantinople, you have mastered the Bosphorus Strait, and of course the Dardanelles, which is also the main route for the Russians to enter the Mediterranean Sea. Now the purpose of the Russians is obvious. While the British are busy competing with the Germans for South Africa and the French for North Africa, to seize the Black Sea Strait and control the Sea of Marmara in their hands. Once this strategic goal is completed, the Russians will be able to attack the Mediterranean Sea if they advance and defend, and they will be invincible in an aid position. If Bulgaria now rejects the Russian proposal, it will interrupt the Russian strategy in the Mediterranean, and the outcome is self-evident. Likewise, the Russians' Mediterranean strategy was in the interests of the French. Only when the Russians enter the Mediterranean will they not concentrate their efforts on the Far East strategy, or even give up the Far East strategy, which will help ease the pressure on France on the European continent. Bulgaria now has no choice. a hard work, a harvest. In Ferdinand's view, the Russians have done a decent job this time. Although Bulgaria has paid a huge price this time, the benefits given are also huge. Even if it is generous to others, Bulgaria can still get hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land, including Istanbul, Macedonia, East Thrace, Albania, etc. In his opinion, all of this can be compromised. Anyway, after the World War, these rights will be returned to Bulgaria's hands. It is completely acceptable to exchange temporary compromise for Bulgaria's growth. After a long silence, Prime Minister Konstantin sighed and said, "Everyone, we have no choice at all. By agreeing to the Russians' conditions, Great Bulgaria is basically completed, and the dream of generations is within us, barely made it in hand. As for the future, we can only take one step at a time. As long as Bulgaria is strong enough, none of this is a problem." It is clear that Prime Minister Konstantin is sane, not carried away by anger, and knows what is in the best interest of Bulgaria. The conditions of the Russians are just stuck on the spot. The Bulgarian Navy should call the coast police more appropriate. Asking them to master the Sea of Marmara is a complete joke. In this case, it is better to leave it to the Russians. After all, if the ties between Europe and Asia of the Ottoman Empire are cut off, Bulgaria's odds of winning will also increase a lot. As for the military ports on the territory in the future, it will be controlled by the Russians. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it is still the territory of the Turks. This is equivalent to Bulgaria sending the army, and the Russians sending the navy to jointly attack the Ottoman Empire. After everyone divides the spoils, everyone does not have to worry about being called a traitor. Following the foreign minister Mitev, he also said, "The current international situation is very beneficial to us. The British are bound to win against South Africa, and the Germans are not willing to let go. They support the Boers and the British to fight in South Africa. And won the support of the European society, there will be no winner in a short time." At the same time, because of the problems in Egypt, the British and the Turks were filthy, and aside from the Russian Empire, they also hoped that we could weaken the Ottoman Empire to protect their interests in Egypt. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had a plan in the Balkans for a long time. They hoped to annex the Bosnia and Herzegovina region. Before, due to the strong resistance of the Turks and the opposition of the Russians, it has not been realized. And now we have to add another Serbia. We can cooperate in this regard, and presumably the Russians are willing to make this deal with them. As for other powers, they have limited power in the Balkans and are unable to interfere in our actions. Moreover, it is still the weakest time for the Turks. The country is a mess, and the endless national uprisings are exhausting the last heritage of this old empire. Ferdinand was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that the foreign minister, who usually doesn't show anything, is still a thorough hawk. And now he is starting to encourage everyone to do it. And his proposal is exactly what Ferdinand needs now. He successfully diverted everyone's attention, and now many people are excited. Of course, Ferdinand also knew that this was based on the premise that the core interests of Bulgaria were not damaged. Now Bulgaria is at a time when nationalism is on the rise, and everyone is unavoidably affected and attaches great importance to national interests. However, Ferdinand interrupted everyone's unrealistic delusions. Okay, take your mind back. We are not ready at all. Weapons and ammunition are still a pile of raw materials. Even if the opportunity is good, we can't learn from the Serbs. Let the soldiers take a pile of scrap metal, just go directly to the battlefield and die. With the negative teaching material of Serbia, Bulgaria is no longer popular with courage to win. After all, Serbian soldiers are really heroic, but on the battlefield, they were not completely defeated by the Bulgarian army. Everyone sighed to themselves that they missed a golden opportunity. However, Ferdinand disagreed. The domestic conflicts of the Ottoman Empire had a long history, and how could they be cleaned up in a short time? The international situation does not change in a day or two. The value of South Africa is so great that it makes all Europe jealous. And the United Kingdom intends to kick the Germans out of their pockets and not block them. Is that still William II? Even if the British can settle the Germans at a great price, what about the French, the Spanish, The Dutch. It can't always be settled, can it? As long as there is the support of foreign powers, the Boers are not so easy to get. Hasn't it been 3 years in history? This is still based on the premise that the British managed to settle the Germans, win over the Portuguese, and by the way, entrap the Spaniards in the Spanish-American War, and won the support of the Americans. Now, the Americans were still the vanguard of the anti-British movement. They didn't have the guts, but they sent volunteers to bring their own food to help the Boers. Historically, the U.S. government supported the British, but the people still donated money and materials and organized volunteers to help the British. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.